A young man named Arhan is filled with a desperate fury, trying to destroy an ancient family heirloom. But when the forge fails, he resorts to a method no man should be capable of. His rage is born from a childhood promise, a burden placed on him by his father. He was told the legend of his family, the Caravans, hailed as the kingdom's invincible protectors, and that Arhan's singular mission was to restore their lost glory. But, as an adult, Arhan has come to believe those stories are nothing but lies. After years of research, he found no proof their so-called legendary family ever even existed. He's already found his own version of glory, a simple, peaceful life with the people he loves. He is their kind young lord, promising to bring his friend Kun his favorite apples from the market. He even remembers a birthday gift for a villager's young daughter. As he rides off on a simple errand, he believes this perfect, happy life will last forever. He was wrong. In his absence, a silent killer appears with a chilling decree: this land must be erased. In a single, blinding flash, the golden fields are painted red with the blood of the innocent. When Arhan returns, the gifts he so carefully chose fall from his trembling hands. He stands alone in a field of death, his entire world slaughtered while he was away. As the full horror of the massacre sets in, the young lord finally breaks. But a dying servant reveals the terrifying truth. The attacker's message was that the caravans must be erased. The entire slaughter took a mere 10 minutes. This was not the work of an army, but the disaster of a single swordmaster. Young Arhan Karavan returns home to a bloodbath. Overwhelmed by the slaughter of his people, his mind begins to break. This was the work of a single, mysterious swordmaster who spared his parents' lives, for now. The man delivers a chilling ultimatum: he will return in 1 month to finish the job. And when asked why, he gives no reason, only that he is following orders. Arhan's father, the lord of the land, is shattered by his powerlessness and descends into madness. His mother reveals they cannot flee. As lord and lady of Caravan, they are honor-bound to stay and die. She confesses a painful truth: their family's heroic history is nothing but a lie. With her final words, she makes him promise to abandon vengeance and just survive. Arhan is dragged away, forced to leave his mother behind to face certain death. But as the carriage flees, the butler makes a shocking discovery. Arhan refuses to abandon his family, returning with a poison-tipped bolt, his only hope of fighting back. He arrives to a sight more horrific than he could ever have imagined. The swordmaster stands over the body of his mother, their resistance deemed foolish. The sight of his murdered mother finally shatters what little is left of the boy's sanity. But as he takes aim, the killer's sheer aura of death paralyzes him with absolute terror. His one chance at revenge slips through his fingers as he collapses in fear. The swordmaster decides to spare the boy, leaving him to drown in his own despair. He issues one last command: if Arhan ever continues the caravan bloodline, he will return to finish it. Broken and alone, Arhan can only cradle his mother's body, his failure absolute. But in his darkest moment, a mysterious power awakens within his family's ancestral sword. And from a time long past, a legend returns to answer his descendants' desperate cry. For 1 year, Arhan has hunted for a single name: Carlos, the man who slaughtered his family. He is lost in grief, haunted by the graves of everyone he failed to protect. But in his darkest hour, a miraculous light offers a glimmer of hope. From a portrait of his ancestor, a spirit of immense power emerges. It is Liam Karavan, the legendary founder of his house, returned from the grave. But Arhan meets this miracle not with awe, but with a year of pent-up rage. The spirit reveals he has been watching, testing his descendants' will for revenge. And now, Liam's own murderous intent can no longer be contained. He reminds Arhan of an unbreakable rule: only a swordmaster can kill a swordmaster. And their target, Carlos, is a transcendent being, a monster even among them. Faced with impossible odds, Arhan's hope begins to crumble. But Liam offers a path to power with a single bizarre command: eat my sword. He reveals the family's secret: they can consume swords to absorb the power and memories of their wielders. The method is simple and horrifying: heat the blade and swallow it. With revenge as his only guide, Arhan makes his choice. He bites down, shattering steel and his own humanity with a single crunch. The power that floods him is agonizing, a fire that threatens to burn him to ash. But through the pain, he is forced to remember exactly why he's doing this. To kill the monster, he will devour the steel and become a monster himself. The morning after Arhan's ordeal, the sun rises peacefully over the caravan estate, a stark contrast to the darkness within. Suddenly, Arhan jolts awake with a scream, the phantom pain of consuming his ancestor's sword still fresh in his mind. Gasping for air, he realizes with a start that he is alive. He checks himself over, astonished to find not a single wound on his body despite the vivid memory of the agonizing process. The entire experience was so surreal that for a moment he almost believed it was all just a nightmare. However, the sight of the sword's hilt lying on the ground serves as undeniable proof that his ordeal was very real. Just then, the spirit of Liam Karavan materializes, commending his descendants' admirable mental fortitude. But Liam's praise is short-lived as he immediately follows up with a harsh critique of Arhan's hopelessly weak body, and explains that even among his direct ancestors, many couldn't withstand the searing pain of consumption and simply gave up. Now that Arhan has passed the test, Liam confirms that all the legends his father told him about the Karavan family are true. Arhan stares, finally convinced that his ancestor's spirit is no mere hallucination. Accepting the reality of the situation, he formally presents himself to his ancestor. With due respect, he kneels and greets him as the progenitor of the Karavan line. Liam laughs heartily, instructing his young descendant to dispense with the formalities and simply call him Master. Arhan readily agrees, acknowledging his new teacher. Eagerly, he then asks if this means he has successfully inherited his master's great power, and he recalls Liam's promise that he could gain power by consuming swords. However, he is perplexed, admitting that despite the excruciating process, he doesn't feel like much has changed. At this, Liam awkwardly clears his throat and explains there's a problem and it's not with him, but with Arhan. Confused, Arhan asks his master what he could possibly mean. Liam explains that his original plan was for Arhan to consume his sword and instantly be raised to the level of a swordmaster, but unfortunately, due to the Karavan bloodline thinning over generations, his innate ability to digest a sword's power has weakened considerably. His master delivers the bad news. In his current state, it's impossible for him to fully digest the essence of a sword as powerful as Liam's. As if to illustrate his point, a core of swirling blue energy appears in Arhan's chest, the undigested power from the sword. Arhan processes this new, unexpected limitation. Yet instead of despairing, he calmly accepts the situation, stating that if his master says it's true, then it must be so. Liam is taken aback by his descendant's surprisingly placid reaction. Arhan then explains that he was already well aware of his body's weakness, so while the result is disappointing, it's not entirely unexpected. And optimistically points out that his master said it was impossible in his current state, implying it's possible in the future. With a look of sheer determination, Arhan concludes that he just needs to start with a sword he can handle and work his way up. A slow smile spreads across Liam's face, deeply impressed by his descendant's insight. He praises him, noting that the young man already possesses the sharp intuition of a true swordmaster. To begin, Liam advises that the more worn out and handled a sword is, the better it will be for him to consume. He then guides Arhan to a vast wasteland piled high with the refuse of old battles, a perfect place to find a shabby weapon. Liam stands with Arhan before the mountain of scrap, promising to pick out the perfect starter sword for him. Looking over the gloomy landscape, Liam jokes that it's the kind of place a necromancer would love. At this, our guy explains that this is a dumping ground for everything from worthless scrap metal to unusable weapons, and tells his master that there's no more suitable place to find a sword that meets his conditions, and Liam agrees it's a good start. The sight brings back memories for Liam, who recalls that he too began by devouring swords on bloody battlefields. He reminisces about consuming the weapons of the fallen, swords from dead soldiers, axes caked in blood, and shattered spears. Arhan listens intently, understanding the grim path his ancestor walked. Liam explains that he did it all for one simple reason: to grow stronger and survive. The vast junkyard serves as a powerful reminder of the harsh beginnings from which his power grew. He then describes a past filled with endless clashes where people fought desperately to guard the sparks of their lives. His ancestor speaks of the battlefield's truth. In the midst of countless struggles, most lives are simply extinguished without a trace. However, he continues, a select few manage to leave behind a single, dazzling point of light. As if summoned by his words, a faint light begins to shine from within a pile of wreckage. Liam's eyes narrow with focus as he spots the source of the light, declaring, he has found it. He points toward a specific spot in the debris, directing his young descendant to the target. The object is a simple, unadorned training sword, which Liam proclaims is the one Arhan must devour as his second sword. 1 month passes and a band of thieves arrives at the caravan mansion, noting that the entire village appears to be abandoned, just as they'd heard. As they cautiously enter the estate, one of them nervously wonders if a warlock once used it for dark experiments. However, the group's leader dismisses the idea, reasoning that if a warlock lived there, they would have been killed the moment they stepped inside. Instead, they figure the mansion is likely just a hideout for a fallen noble. Despite its abandoned state, the bandits can still smell the lingering scent of wealth. 2 of the thugs celebrate their good fortune, believing the job will be an easy score with no one around. Suddenly, one of the men freezes, realizing something is out of place. He discovers a wardrobe and lecherously assumes a noble's daughter must be living there. He then pulls out a freshly laundered dress, confirming for the others that someone is indeed still in residence. After that, he inhales its scent with a creepy grin. One of them begins to get excited, suggesting that if they play their cards right, they might have some fun. As the ruffians get rowdier, demanding to see a portrait of the lady of the house, their boisterousness is cut short. A calm, authoritative voice echoes through the hall, commanding them, "Stop." From a darkened doorway, Arhan Karavan, the young lord of the manor, emerges. He coldly informs the intruders that his mother cherished tidiness and orders them to put down her belongings. Stepping into the light with a stern expression, he suggests they all have a conversation. The bandits are stunned into silence, surprised by the sudden appearance of the young man. They quickly size him up, while one of them mutters his disappointment that it's a boy and not a woman. Arhan calmly asks the men if they came seeking food or simply a place to stay. He then offers them an out, stating he's willing to accept them as guests if their intentions are benign. The bandit leader just scoffs at the offer, mockingly asking the young lord if he's lost his mind, and insults him further, sneering that nobles like him must not have any common sense. He advances menacingly, telling Arhan he should have stayed hidden instead of crawling out to make a fuss. Arhan remains perfectly still, closing his eyes as if bored by the man's threats. Enraged by the apparent disrespect, the bandit leader roars, "Is he that eager to die?" as he raises his axe at Arhan's head. But Arhan's eyes snap open, now glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. His pupils morph into fiery red slits, a sign that his newfound power has been unleashed. Before the bandit leader's axe can hit him, he pierces the man's gut instantly with his needle-like sword. As blood erupts from the leader's mouth, he finally understands their fatal mistake, just as Arhan states coldly, "So they were intruders," and completes his statement, "Not guests." The scene shifts back to the past. Before the Roaring Forge, Arhan stands ready for his next lesson from his ancestor, Liam. The two of them prepare for the next step in his training. Liam presents him with his next meal, a bizarre, needle-thin sword. Arhan examines the blade, noting that it looks less like a sword and more like a simple needle. He voices his concern that the fragile weapon might snap, but his ancestor assures him this is by design. However, the spirit explains that this sword was never meant for conventional slashing or crushing. Instead, it's a specialized weapon forged for a single, deadly purpose. In a life-or-death battle, its design is for one thing only, piercing an enemy's vital points. It's meant to deliver a swift and decisive end to a foe's life with a single, precise strike, and declares that this is a sword meant only to thrust. Bewildered, Arhan questions the utility of a sword designed exclusively for thrusting. Ever perceptive, Liam correctly guesses that his descendant is wondering why one wouldn't just use a spear instead. And that question is not without merit. However, he tells him that the memories dwelling within that sword are the most useful thing for Arhan's weak and fragile body. To illustrate his point, he then reveals a staggering fact about the sword's history. Its previous owner, before her death, single-handedly used it to end the lives of over 2,000 enemies. More shocking still, this legendary warrior was a woman with a body even more slender than his own. He instructs him to show the weapon the respect it has earned, and to consume it with gratitude for the power and experience it holds. Resolute, Arhan steps toward the forge, ready to consume the blade and its history. As he heats the sword, Liam warns him that while its sins are light, the life it carries is immeasurably heavy. His ancestor promises that Arhan has much to gain from inheriting the memories of the woman who once wielded this rapier. As the sword is consumed, he is flooded with memories of its previous owner, starting with the image of a burning mansion. It's a memory of a massive fire that consumed everything. And he sees a young girl named Mary, barely 10 years old, waking up covered in bandages and scars. In that inferno, her parents had been burned to unrecognizable ashes. Learning she was the sole survivor of the tragedy, the child is overcome with grief. Lying in her sickbed, she whispers her deepest desire, to have died with her family. Orphaned and alone, she was sent to live in an old orphanage that worshipped a goddess of fire. In a cruel twist of irony, the place meant to be her sanctuary viewed the very element that had destroyed her life as salvation. Having lost everything to fire, she found herself trapped in a place that revered it, a constant, painful reminder of her trauma. She realized then that she hadn't escaped the flames at all, and her suffering was far from over. The days that followed at the fire-worshipping orphanage were horribly peaceful. The other residents gossiped behind her back, wondering about her scarred face and whispering that she was cursed by the goddess. They saw her burns not as a sign of tragedy, but as a disgusting mark of a divine curse. She was ostracized and tormented, branded as creepy, a monster disgusting and horrible by those around her. Broken by the constant hatred and her own grief, her will to live shattered, and once again she wished for death. Every day she prayed for an end, desperate to escape the phantom flames of her past and the very real fire of hatred that surrounded her. Her despair continued, unchanging, until one fateful day altered her path forever. One night she witnessed an old man practicing with his sword under the moonlight. Though his swordsmanship was crude, it possessed a raw beauty that, for a fleeting moment, made her forget the hell she was living in. The man was Heckle, a former wandering knight who had been working at the orphanage for a long time. Normally, to an old man with such a harsh face, she wouldn't have even dared to say a single word. But something compelled her to approach him as he stood alone in the woods. With newfound courage, she asked the old swordsman how she can become like him. Declaring she wants to learn, Mary takes her first defiant step towards wanting to live again. Heckle looks down at the small, scarred girl with a stern, dismissive expression. He tells her that learning the sword won't be of much help in life, especially for a girl. The old knight warns her that a blade like his will only end up hurting her in the end. As he tries to send her away, Mary tearfully pleads her case. She vows that if she can just learn to fight, then no fire in this world will ever be able to scare her again. Her desperate conviction gives the old swordsman pause. Later, in a storage room, Heckle makes his decision. He presents her with a barrel of heavy training swords and issues a challenge. If she can even swing one, he will teach her. Mary silently observes the heavy blades, her expression unreadable. Mary asks, does she have to swing at Heckle? If not that, then what? Ignoring the broadswords, her hand reaches for a different kind of weapon, and she chooses the thin, needle-like blade, declaring that as long as she can fight back, nothing else matters. In a stunning display of intent, she points the blade directly at her would-be master's throat. With fierce determination, she proclaims that she will become whatever she needs to be. The memory of Mary's past concludes, a story of her first act of defiance. And, as Arhan's consciousness returns to the present, he unleashes his own first thrust, recognizing the bandits as intruders. The bandit leader chokes in agony as the needlesword finds its mark. With a single perfect strike inherited from Mary's memories, Arhan fells the hulking man. He stands over the corpse of his first kill while the remaining bandits look on. The intruders are paralyzed with shock, unable to comprehend what just happened. Their easy raid has turned into a nightmare as they stare in disbelief at the seemingly weak boy who just killed their leader. Seeing their fear, he decides there's no need for further conversation and prepares to eliminate the rest. Watching from the shadows, Liam's spirit observes the scene with a knowing look. He reflects that over the past month, he only taught his descendant one thing. That one thing was a rigorous physical training method to build Arhan's stamina, allowing him to run for hours without tiring. And he proudly notes that he taught the boy absolutely nothing about actual swordsmanship. The fact that Arhan could execute such a perfect thrust is proof that he is properly digesting the sword's memories and skills. With pride, he urges his descendant to show him what he's truly capable of. Holding the needle sword with newfound resolve, Arhan prepares to show his ancestor and the remaining bandits his first true step as a caravan. He reflects on the fatal blow he has just landed, a precise strike aimed at the intruder. The thug collapses, his lungs fatally pierced, a feat of incredible precision between the ribs. Our guy acknowledges that as an unskilled novice he could never have performed such an expert thrust on his own. And he realizes the only reason for his success is the power inherited from the needle, the sword he consumed a month prior. The memories of Mary, the needle's original wielder, flood his mind, revealing the source of his newfound skill. He recalls that Heckle taught Mary how to stand straight and hold the sword, and even how to survive. While his methods weren't based on a formal, established theory, they were practical and effective. His swordsmanship was a free-spirited style born from a life as a wandering knight. For Mary, who had always feared fire, the dance of Heckle's blade was a beautiful and captivating sight. She trained relentlessly in the snow, mastering the quiet toughness inherent in his fighting style. Proudly, she came to call this unique style Heckle's blade, a tribute to her beloved mentor. And she loved the swordsmanship he taught her with all her heart, and their bond deepened over the years. A few years later, a frail Heckle lies on his deathbed, telling her the day will come for her to leave. He holds her hand, urging her to go out and see the wider world when the time is right. And this is the last lesson he leaves for her, his final lesson. Mary weeps as he tells her he is glad she is there for the end of his journey. As he passes away, she holds his hand, overcome with grief for the man who saved her. She sits by his bedside and bids her master a final, grateful farewell. Following Heckle's teachings, Mary left the orphanage and ventured out into the world, her blade her only companion. It wasn't long before she made a name for herself as a skilled and well-known mercenary. Whether it was her peculiar, needle-thin sword or the rarity of a young woman in her profession, she quickly drew attention. On the battlefield, she became known by a unique and fearsome moniker. Her enemies came to know her as the Sewing Gypsy, a testament to her deadly, precise strikes. Back in the present, Arhan understands that this influx of skill and memory is the digestion his ancestor mentioned. Mary's memories flow into his mind, speaking to him and guiding his movements. The dying thug leader begs for mercy, pleading with Arhan to spare his life. But he grips his weapon, ignoring the man's pleas. Without a word, he plunges his blade into the man's forehead, showing no hesitation. With cold determination, he pulls out the blade, ensuring a clean kill. Kneeling over the body, he calmly registers that this is his very first kill. Despite it being his first time taking a life, he feels a chilling and utter lack of emotion. He is detached, seeing only the reality of the situation before him. However, he assesses that he only won because his opponent underestimated him, a mistake the remaining thugs won't repeat. He then eyes the other intruders, wondering why they haven't charged him yet. Despite having the advantage in numbers, they are frozen in place, their faces etched with fear. The spirit of Ilium appears behind him, explaining that they are simply terrified. Ilium notes that his movements were far too skilled for a beginner, which is why they are so afraid. The thugs panic among themselves, paralyzed by a fear that clouds their judgment, and explains that this level of fear is tricking them into seeing Arhan as a much more powerful being than he actually is. He then tells Arhan what he has become in the eyes of his terrified enemies. To them, he is no longer a boy, but a sword-wielding fiend. Accepting this new identity, Arhan launches himself forward. His cold gaze fixes on his frightened targets. Now is the time to strike. One of the thugs musters his courage and swings, screaming that he'll kill the boy. Arhan effortlessly dodges the clumsy, fear-driven attack, pivoting on his heel. With his opponent wide open, he prepares a counterattack, his eyes glowing with deadly intent. He executes a swift, lethal strike, and blood erupts from his victim's neck. As another foe falls, his mind fills with the voice of Hekel, echoing from Mary's memories. Hekel's lesson surfaces: as a woman without brute strength or stamina, she could not afford prolonged fights. Another thug screams as he strikes with a spear, putting all his strength into the blow. Arhan leaps and easily dodges the powerful but slow attack. Hekel's voice continues in his mind: she had to end the fight on the first, or, at the latest, the second attack. Applying this lesson, he closes in and drives his blade into the thug's arm. The thug's eyes widen in shock and pain as the needle-like sword finds its mark. With a final, decisive upward thrust, Arhan pierces his enemy, just as Hekel had taught Mary. Hekel's core philosophy echoes in his mind, to focus not on what one lacks, but on making one's strength shine. The remaining thug watches in horror as his comrades are cut down with terrifying efficiency. Mary's greatest strength, now his, was her natural flexibility, the body of a dancer. This flexibility allowed her to launch attacks from any posture and from any angle, making her movements unpredictable and deadly. Channeling her unique style, Arhan flips through the air in a graceful, acrobatic motion. And he descends upon the final thug, his blade poised to strike from an impossible angle. The man screams as Arhan's blade pierces his head, and he declares that he can take aim at the enemy's life. Our guy lands silently as the last of the intruders falls to the ground behind him. After that, he turns his attention to the last one, who trembles in utter disbelief and terror. In his final moments, he sees not a boy, but a terrifying, murderous fiend. Under the pale moonlight, Arhan finishes his grim task. After burying the bodies of the thugs he killed, he is confronted by his ancestor. Ilium appears before the exhausted young man, asking if he has finally cast away his doubt about the caravan way, and explains that with the stamina gained from digesting a sword, Arhan is now strong enough to handle low-level threats. Just then, he confidently states that 4 untrained thugs are opponents he can now easily handle alone. He proudly proclaims that a caravan, when faced with a life-or-death battle, only grows stronger. Arhan realizes with a jolt that everything his master has told him about their power is true. He remembers that as the fight progressed, his body grew more flexible, and the memories of the swordswoman Mary became crystal clear. By channeling her experience, he now understands the feeling of fighting against the entire world alone. He wonders if this incredible growth in the heat of battle is what Ilium meant by the power of digestion. At this, Ilium gravely reassures his descendant, stating that when it comes to the sword, he never lies, and warns him that his future will be a series of trials so painful he'll wish for death. His warning intensifies, promising that future hardships will make today's battle feel like a blessing. Despite the grim forecast, he asks if Arhan is still willing to walk this arduous path. Arhan clenches his fist, his resolve unshaken, declaring that any path is worth it if it leads to Carlos's throat. With unwavering determination, he accepts his fate and fully embraces Ilium as his master. But his confidence is immediately shattered as he finds himself in a new, terrifying situation. Gasping for air as he clings to a sheer cliff face, he begins to question if this is truly the right path. His new training regimen, a brutal free climb up a massive cliff, pushes him to his absolute limit. As rocks crumble beneath his grip, he struggles up the desolate, towering cliff. Clinging precariously to the cliffside, his resolve wavers, as he once again questions his master's methods. Ilium appears beside him, chiding him for letting doubt return so soon after his declaration. However, he concedes that Arhan's tendency to question everything has been a strength of his since childhood. While acknowledging it as a strength, he notes that it is a trait they will eventually need to address. However, Ilium decides to answer his unspoken question about the purpose of this training. He begins his lesson explaining the first two ranks, the sword beginner and the talented swordwalker. He continues describing the sword runner, a linchpin of the battlefield, and the sword expert, a hero who can turn the tide of battle alone. Above them all is a rank that reigns supreme over all swordsmen. This final stage is a being so powerful they are revered as a god. A legion of knights kneels before the might of such a being. This ultimate state, the achievement of the mind sword, is known as a swordmaster. Ilium then poses a question to his descendant. Among these ranks, where does he believe he belongs? Arhan smirks, admitting that while a bold answer is expected, he knows his own level all too well, and explains that the prerequisite to becoming a swordmaster is wielding mana, which requires a vessel, a second heart called a mana heart. Since he has yet to form a mana heart, he humbly admits he doesn't even qualify as a beginner, impressing Ilium with his self-awareness. Ilium confirms his assessment, calling him a novice among novices, and reveals that this training is to bring him to the beginner level. Arhan is stunned to learn that this life-threatening climb is just to form a mana heart. He yells in disbelief, questioning why he is risking death just to form one. Clinging on for dear life, he can't comprehend why they are taking such a dangerous route for this basic step. He argues that in the current era, one can simply drink an alchemist potion to achieve the same result. Alternatively, a walker-level knight can infuse a person with mana to awaken their senses and form a mana heart. He then points out the method is so simple that even noble ladies who only learn self-defense can easily form one. Frustrated, he demands to know why they are sticking to this archaic and dangerous method instead of taking the easy path. The sheer absurdity of his life-threatening training for such a common goal leaves him utterly bewildered. Ilium calmly agrees that forming a mana heart isn't difficult and that the normal methods would work. However, he explains, the blood of caravans is imbued with the unyielding power of steel, requiring an equally tough vessel. His ancestor reveals that an ordinary heart will not suffice for a caravan, as it can only reach the level of a human. To truly reach the level of a swordmaster, he insists, a caravan must have one thing, an essential component that can clash with the world itself and remain unscratched, a heart of steel. And he declares there is only one way to forge such a powerful heart. The body must be endlessly pushed to the brink of death, forcing it to feel the need for a mana heart and create one on its own. This training is so grueling that even among Ilium's descendants, very few have ever completed it. The process is so painful and terrible that most either give up or perish. However, the few who endured to the very end became true swordmasters. Having explained the stakes and the reward, Ilium asks a collapsed Arhan if he's feeling motivated. A surge of determination flows through Arhan as he grips the rock. With a fierce grin, he declares that he's feeling more than a little motivated. Pleased with his descendants' resolve, Ilium smiles, reiterating that he never lies when it comes to the sword. He promises Arhan that the mana heart he forges through this trial will be different. The scene shifts to a different location under the full moon, the eastern village of Campbell, in the Verdi region. Inside a local tavern, patrons whisper rumors about the eerie western village of Caravan. One man notes that no one has been seen there for a year, calling it a creepy place. A rumor is spreading that something resides in the village. This something is said to be dangerous, as all the ruffians who have ventured there have never returned. Theories about the disappearances range from monster waves to necromancers, but they all share one conclusion. The warning is clear. If you don't want to die, stay out of the western village. At another table, a mysterious masked man silently listens to the tavern gossip. Intrigued by the tale of a village where entry means death, the masked man puts down his drink. The man is cloaked, with a distinct scar on his lip. He wipes away blood, seemingly from a recent fight, and seems unfazed by the tavern warnings. With a determined look, the mysterious cloaked man decides this deadly village is the perfect place for him. Arhan recalls the brutal month of training he just endured, which included grueling exercises like holding onto a cliff with only his left hand. Under his ancestor's spectral supervision, he dealt with any trespassers on the caravan estate, all while pushing his body to its absolute limit. He endured excruciating muscle pain from his physical training, pushing boulders even on days when it was a struggle just to lift his arm. Without missing a single day, he poured all his might into the grueling regimen laid out for him. He pushed forward with everything he had, determined to grow stronger. The strain is evident as he grips the rock face, sweat dripping from his fingers, and just like that, a month passed. He reflects on whether that absurd training was enough for him to form a mana heart. Sighing in disappointment, he admits to himself that unfortunately he did not succeed. However, as he looks down at his hand, he senses that something has changed. Despite his failure to form a mana heart, he knows a change is clearly taking place within him. It is a change in his very perception when he recalls his past fights with ruffians. One of the most significant changes is that his senses have become incredibly sharp. His eyes can now track incoming attacks with a newfound, supernatural clarity. During the battles, his senses are so sharp that he can effortlessly weave through a flurry of attacks. And he realizes it's not just his five senses like sight and hearing that have been enhanced. His judgment and concentration in combat situations have also improved dramatically. He's now able to perceive and dodge attacks from his blind spots with ease. And his overall combat ability has become incomparable to what it was before. He discovers that whenever he wields the needle and focuses intensely on a single point, for just a brief moment, the world around him warps. As he launches himself at an opponent, a strange phenomenon occurs. In this state of hyper-focus, it feels as if time itself has stopped for everyone but him. This perceived time dilation allows him to move and counterattack while his enemy is seemingly frozen in place. He easily dodges the swing, closing the distance as if in a stopped moment. His opponent's eyes widen in disbelief at his impossible speed. With surgical precision, his weapon finds its mark. His eyes remain cold and steady as he executes a series of lethal strikes. The opponent is struck in multiple vital points almost simultaneously. The man collapses, his life extinguished in an instant. Arhan understands that the difference between the him of the past and the him now is just one thing. The crucial change, the source of his newfound power, is that he can now feel mana. The needle, a weapon from a consumed sword, lies on the ground after the training session. The training grounds are littered with swords he has consumed, standing like tombstones in the dust. Our guy remarks on how astonishing it is that he achieved this state without even forming a mana heart or becoming a sword beginner. While acknowledging the power of the needle, he admits that his own rapid growth is truly remarkable. Arhan asks his master what kind of power he will possess when he finally reaches the next level. Liam calls his current abilities trivial, but agrees to explain the stages of power that await him. He explains that once Arhan forms a mana heart and becomes a sword beginner, he will begin to understand the true depths of power, and states that only then will he be on equal footing with the original owner of the needle. After becoming a beginner, the next step involves using a path from the mana heart to enhance one's physical abilities. This allows one to reach the realm of superhumans, a level known as a swordwalker. Liam sternly warns that despite it being the next stage, the power gap between a beginner and a swordwalker is vast. Arhan confirms that he understands. Using his newly sharpened senses, he then asks his master if his perception of a powerful presence is correct, and asks if the man who recently entered the territory and settled nearby is. A mysterious cloaked man sits among the ruins, his sword lying on the ground before him, and he unleashes a powerful red and blue aura. The mysterious swordwalker reveals himself, his weary but intense gaze fixed forward. Liam confirms his fears, stating that the man is on a completely different level and that Arhan wouldn't last a single second against him in his current state. Despite the overwhelming difference in power, Arhan steels himself, deciding to observe the situation and prepare for the worst. Liam suggests the most logical course of action: abandon the territory to avoid a fight he cannot possibly win. But Arhan firmly rejects the idea, declaring that's not an option. He looks out over his desolate, ruined home, acknowledging its tragic state. Yet he declares that this is the only place that holds everyone's memories, and he will not abandon it. Liam falls silent, a slight smile on his face as he recognizes his descendants' unyielding will. With his resolve set, Arhan turns to face the approaching threat. His ancestor offers words of encouragement, telling the young man to grow stronger, and delivers a harsh truth. In this kingdom, only the strong have answers, and his simple wish to protect this home is a luxury he can't yet afford. Liam advises him to use the emotions he feels now, his resolve, his grief, his anger, as the driving force to obtain what he desires. He must feed on this new trial and forge himself to be as hard as steel. And he must become so powerful that no one will ever dare to laugh at his words or challenge his will again. He wonders whether it was because his master's words reached him as he faces a sword glowing with a blue aura. Just then, the Swordwalker appears before him, pointing his sword, and warning him not to even think about running. The powerful intruder's sword glows with an oppressive mana. The Swordwalker delivers a chilling ultimatum. Show me your back, and I will cut you down on the spot. Faced with an opponent far beyond his current abilities, Arhan realizes an unexpected and deadly trial has arrived. After a mysterious man took up residence in his desolate territory, Arhan began a new daily routine. And so, his days consisted of observing the strange man from afar as he moved through the ruined village. Through this constant surveillance, he learned a few things about the stranger's habits. For one, despite the abundance of empty houses, the man never touched a single item, respecting the property of the absent owners. And he lived a Spartan life, subsisting only on the few belongings he had brought with him. Arhan also noted that the man would often lose himself in thought while watching the sunset each day. At other times, he would go into the woods to pray, leading our protagonist to a single conclusion. Watching from the shadows, he whispered his deduction to himself. The mysterious guest seemed to be a knight. Liam's spirit agrees, identifying the man as a swordwalker who strictly adheres to rules and manners even when no one is watching. His ancestor notes that such inflexible people are rare, usually found only among the ranks of knights. At this, Arhan optimistically suggests that a knight who upholds justice might not be such a bad first neighbor to have. But Liam scoffs at his naivety, warning him that while knights pursue honor, it is misleading to call them righteous. He explains that a knight's honor is highly subjective, and ultimately defined by the one they have sworn loyalty to. Ultimately, he states, a knight's code is dictated by the will and wealth of their employer. With a harsh glint in his eye, the spirit prepares to teach Arhan the true, brutal meaning of the word knight. He defines them as nothing more than executioners who use honor as a pretext to exercise violence. And clad in expensive gear, they're simply enemies who are annoyingly difficult to kill. He then warns him not to be fooled by the title, but to instead observe and judge the man's true essence. And he reveals what he believes to be Arhan's most precious and unique talent, the ability to doubt. Taken aback, Arhan questions how doubting could possibly be considered a talent. Liam explains that even as a child, while pretending to listen to his father's legends, he was secretly investigating their truth. Even after gaining power, he wasn't intoxicated by it, instead using observation and a morbid sensitivity to find answers, just as he did with the bandits. His ancestor defines doubt as the refusal to be swayed by appearances, and the drive to use any means necessary to reach the truth. He then proclaims that those who cannot doubt will never be able to cross their own limits. With newfound understanding in his eyes, Arhan listens as Liam tells him this very trait is his true talent for the sword. He accepts the lesson, quietly saying, "Understood." Promising to keep his ancestors' words in mind, he turns his attention back to the praying swordwalker. It was time to put the lesson into practice. Despite all his observations, he had never fully let his guard down around the strange man. So, after determining the man was unlikely to be an intruder, Arhan decided to approach him slowly, and his goal was simple, to invite the man to be his neighbor. But his plan was about to be completely derailed. Before he can even speak, the swordwalker turns, revealing he was aware of his presence all along and warning him not to run. At this, our guy is sweating with fear. The swordwalker's blade glows with a menacing blue aura as he issues a dire warning. He warns Arhan that if he dares to show his back, he will be cut down on the spot. Gripping his rapier, our guy realizes his attempt at a peaceful introduction has gone completely sideways. The tense situation triggers a memory from the rapier's previous owner, Mary, a woman once known as the Sewing Gypsy. In her memories, that alias brought her fame, with well-known mercenary groups trying to recruit her. However, that same reputation also attracted thugs and challengers who wanted to test the rumors for themselves. And as she dealt with these endless fights, a certain arrogant thought began to take root in her mind. As she effortlessly defeated her opponents, she started to believe she was more than just a peculiar mercenary. With a confident smirk, she came to believe that she had become a truly strong swordswoman. However, the moment that shattered her arrogance, symbolized by the broken tip of her sword, was swift to arrive. A knight of the Red Hawks appeared before her, addressing her by her famous alias. He mockingly called her nickname fitting for such a feeble sword, belittling her pride. Her confidence evaporated as she stared up at the imposing, fully armored knight. With a single, effortless move, he grabbed her, dismissing her as nothing more than a lowly mercenary. He even sneered that if she weren't a woman, he'd have killed a bugs like her on the spot. And he declared that the only reason she survived was because of the Red Hawk Knight's rule against killing women and children. Tossing her aside, he told her to spend the rest of her life being grateful for their chivalry. In that moment of defeat, she felt the crushing weight of an immeasurable wall. It was the insurmountable wall that stood between a mercenary like her and a true knight. Back in the present, Arhan realizes that the knight who defeated Mary must have also reached the stage of the Swordwalker. He swallows nervously, understanding that the Mary in his memories was far stronger than he is now, yet she was still defeated in an instant. As the Swordwalker draws closer, Arhan is overcome with an overwhelming sense of death. This feeling of impending doom is even more vivid than when he hung from a cliff to train his senses. Yet, this immense pressure causes his heart to pound not with fear, but with a surge of newfound power. Instead of faltering, his very heart seems to grow stronger in the face of mortal danger. His eyes glow with a blue light as he realizes his perception has evolved, finally allowing him to see it. He can now perceive the realm of a superhuman, a power accessible only to those at the level of a Swordwalker. And he can see the man's mana flowing outside his body like an aura, amplifying his every offense and defense. And in a flash of insight, he envisions his own immediate and absolute defeat. He now truly understands the overwhelming power gap represented by the Swordwalker's path. The Swordwalker finally speaks, questioning why he was being watched and mentioning the rumors of an attacker in the area. And he demands a valid reason for the surveillance, warning that he will be considered an enemy otherwise. Arhan calmly explains his reason. He was watching to determine if the man was a guest or an intruder. The knight responds, he finds that hard to understand. Be more specific. Arhan explains that he is a resident who was born and raised here, and recounts how a year ago his village was ruined and his neighbors vanished while he was away. The Swordwalker listens as he explains that barbarians have since invaded, threatening the village and his very life. Choosing his words carefully, he claims to have dealt with all previous intruders himself, conveniently omitting the details of his unique abilities. After that, he clarifies that he only observed from a distance because the knight's power was so immense that a careless approach would have meant certain death. He then explains his simple, two-pronged plan: invite him to be a neighbor if he was a guest, or devise a new strategy if he was an intruder. At this, the Swordwalker questions his resolve, asking if he was truly prepared to fight, despite knowing the massive difference in their skills. But Arhan stands his ground, declaring that this land holds a lifetime of memories and is too precious to simply abandon. The knight's stern expression breaks for a moment, clearly surprised by the young man's conviction. He acknowledges his deep connection to the land, quietly repeating the words, "A precious place." With a look of newfound understanding, the Swordwalker remarks that the young master has clearly endured great hardship. He agrees that if they are to be neighbors, it's time for him to state his own position, and he asks him to sheath his weapon so they can talk openly. With his face shadowed, Liam's voice echoes in his mind, reminding him that a heart of steel is forged only by endlessly pushing oneself to the brink of death. His ancestor's challenging question, "Are you feeling motivated yet?" replays in his memory, testing his resolve. And so, despite his desire for peace, Arhan apologizes and refuses to lower his sword. He explains that he can't fully trust the knight yet, and needs his weapon for self-defense. The Swordwalker points out the futility of this, stating that the small sword would be meaningless against him. Then he reveals his own dilemma: as a knight, being the first to sheathe his sword in a standoff would tarnish his honor. Arhan understands his code, but firmly states that he cannot back down either. The memory of kneeling in terror before Carlos flashes through his mind, a moment of ultimate surrender. With unwavering determination in his glowing eyes, he declares that he has sworn never again to kneel in fear and give up before a fight has even begun. The mysterious Swordwalker and Arhan stand facing each other at dawn, ready for their duel. The walker internally sizes up his opponent, noting the boy looks delicate enough to be mistaken for a girl. Yet, despite his slender build, he observes that the boy's body shows clear signs of grueling physical training. He continues his assessment, recognizing that while his frame is flimsy, his balance is impeccable, and concludes that the boy has no proper swordsmanship training, just an unorthodox style that pours everything into the first strike, barely at a beginner's level. He confidently dismisses him, concluding that the boy poses not even the slightest threat. He then assumes the boy must also be aware of the massive power gap between them, and yet he's baffled by the unwavering determination burning in his young opponent's eyes. A glint of power shines in the young man's eyes as he prepares to face the impossible. Ready to engage, the Swordwalker exhales a breath tinged with his powerful blue aura. He levels his sword, preparing a measured response to the boy's challenge. His aura intensifies, a silent warning that a half-hearted response simply won't do. While Arhan holds his ground, the walker closes the distance between them in an instant. He then leaps into the air, preparing a downward strike against his seemingly outmatched opponent. The knight decides on a non-lethal approach, aiming to strike the boy's wrist and disarm him immediately. and he believes this is the best way to end the fight without causing serious injury. But just as his attack is about to land, he sees something unexpected. The clash of steel rings out as, against all odds, the boy successfully parries the Swordwalker's attack. The walker's eyes widen in absolute shock at this impossible turn of events. He can't believe his sword was just deflected by someone who isn't even at a beginner's level. Arhan, far from being overwhelmed, immediately repositions himself. And in the wake of their clash, the walker senses a powerful surge of mana radiating from him. Mana swirls around the young man like powerful waves, a phenomenon that shouldn't be possible for a beginner. The knight wonders in disbelief if he somehow managed to form a mana heart in that single split second. His suspicions are confirmed as he witnesses the raw power of an abnormal mana heart blazing to life within the boy. He is rattled. Deflecting his sword should have been impossible, yet it happened. He then questions if this feat was due to the boy's mana heart, which he notes is unlike any normal, flexible one. Instead, his mana heart is astonishingly rigid and solid, like a sharp crystal. The knight aptly names it in his mind, a heart of steel. As the dust settles, the walker remains uncertain about what just transpired. But one thing is crystal clear, a counterattack is coming. And he braces himself, sensing that the boy's next move is a strike containing his entire being staked on his very life. Arhan, however, knows the truth behind his miraculous defense. He admits to himself that blocking the knight's sword wasn't due to his own skill. It was nothing more than a complete fluke, and the sweat of a near-death experience beads on his brow, and correctly deduces that it was only possible because the knight had no intention of hurting him, aiming for his wrist with minimal force. Using his hyper-perception, he predicted the attack's trajectory and thrust his own needle-like sword into the narrow gap. The gamble paid off, successfully blocking the strike in a shower of sparks. But the price for that miracle is steep. The impact feels like he collided head-on with the speeding carriage. He grits his teeth through the agony ravaging his body, feeling as if every bone has been shattered. He faces the despairing gap in their power, a chasm as wide as a small child standing before a monstrous beast. And yet, a slight determined smile spreads across his face. Despite the pain, he is victorious in his own way, having finally awakened the heart of steel he so desperately longed for. However, he acknowledges his reality. Even with this new power, he's still a beginner, and his thrust will never reach such a skilled knight. Realizing a direct confrontation is futile, he concludes there is only one way forward. He must create a path of his own. He resolves to forge a unique fighting style, leveraging his newfound heart of steel and his specialized needle-like sword. To do this, he will use another's painful memories of defeat as a stepping stone, Mary's memories. He recalls the day she collapsed before the overwhelming wall of a swordwalker. As she faced that insurmountable limit, her body trembled with fear. But in that moment of despair, a memory came to her. It was the voice of her mentor, Heckle. The memory shows a sick and dying Heckle, sharing his final wisdom with her. He explained that while most swordsmen see a wall as an insurmountable limit, it's merely an excuse for those who lack courage. Walls, he declared, exist solely to be overcome, and told her that the fear she feels is the fate of all who hold a sword, and that it is merely a stepping stone to greater heights. His voice echoes, "Don't look away. Stand tall instead, and face it head-on." In her memory, Mary faced that Red Hawk Knight, her own formidable wall. The knight's overwhelming presence seemed impossible to overcome. Heckle's voice continued, warning that she would be cut and torn apart miserably, and that she would fall to her knees in helplessness. "But if you don't give up and continue to strike against it," his words continued, "your sword will surely surpass that wall." Mary recalled the words with fierce determination, her mentor's wisdom giving her strength. "So believe in yourself," was his final piece of advice. Inspired by this philosophy, passed down through Mary's memory, Arhan stands resolute, his heart of steel glowing, ready to overcome his own wall. The mysterious swordwalker watches with intrigue, surprised by the young man's resolve in the face of such overwhelming power, and muses that every swordsman who has lived a fierce life will eventually face an insurmountable obstacle. For Arhan, this obstacle manifests as a massive, metaphorical wall representing the immense power gap between them. Yet despite the crushing pressure and a deep sense of hopelessness, he readies his stance, refusing to yield. The walker notes that his aura alone should make a single step feel like an impossible burden for the boy. And he had fully expected Arhan to be overwhelmed by the instinct to turn his back and flee from certain defeat. And yet, the experienced knight is shocked to see that he shows no signs of backing down. Fueled by sheer determination, the seemingly unbreakable wall in Arhan's path begins to crack. Instead of running, he prepares to defy the odds and clash directly against the insurmountable wall before him. Our guy internally acknowledges that while this may seem like youthful recklessness, it's a trial he absolutely must overcome. He then reasons that his path to victory doesn't need to be perfect, Even a clumsy and incomplete plan is enough to begin. As long as there is even a sliver of a possibility of reaching his goal, he believes that alone is motivation enough. Harnessing his unique family ability, Arhan focuses his mind, beginning to doubt and analyze every aspect of his opponent. He observes every minute detail, the muscles his opponent uses, the rhythm of his breathing, and the intended trajectory of his blade. With intense focus, he gathers every clue, eliminates all unnecessary information, and begins to forge his one chance. Through this intense analysis, a single, shining path to a potential opening begins to form in his mind. With his target clear, he visualizes the one path he must take to reach that specific point. And he has successfully forged a single path, a sliver of hope against an opponent he should have no chance against. At this, the spirit of Liam smiles, saying, "That's a descendant to advance without yielding before any adversity," and proudly affirms that this indomitable spirit is precisely what it means to be a caravan. His ancestor's voice echoes in his mind, encouraging him not to fear shattering, and willingly throws his whole body into the trial and forges himself. He then urges his descendant to display this power for the world to see, the flow of the caravan's will. Channeling this newfound will, Arhan explodes forward, charging directly at the Swordwalker. But as he runs, a flicker of memory surfaces, and he admits to himself that a part of him was deeply afraid. Suddenly, his consciousness is flooded with the memories of Mary, the needle's previous owner, as her will and emotions merge with his own. She relives her tragic past, understanding that being the sole survivor of the fire was only the beginning of her hardships, and he feels her despair, the days she couldn't look in a mirror, and the moments when even breathing felt like a burden. And through her pain, he comes to a profound realization about what she truly feared. It wasn't the fire she feared, but her own weakness, her tendency to constantly run away. Embracing her ultimate decision to stand and fight, Arhan resolves to push forward with an unwavering thrust. Just then he witnesses visions of all that she lost to the fire that consumed her world, her daily life, her family. He feels the crushing weight of her future being stolen from her by the tragedy. Now, he fully understands the world filled with fire that she had to navigate alone. Channeling her final conviction, Arhan screams, knowing there is only one answer to whether he will pierce through this wall. The only answer is action, a single, decisive thrust born of absolute resolve. Unified with her spirit, he is no longer afraid of the fire, the world, or the insurmountable odds before him. And he accepts that even if he collapses, even if he can't possibly win, he now has the strength to face his fate head-on. Without flinching, however, the mysterious Swordwalker readies himself to meet the desperate, all-or-nothing charge. With grim determination, the two swordsmen rush toward each other for the decisive clash. In a blur of motion, his rapier meets the Swordwalker's powerful blade. The two weapons are about to collide with immense force. A deafening clang rings out as steel crashes against steel. The overwhelming power difference is made clear as his rapier shatters into dozens of pieces. The remnants of the broken blade spin through the air. In his mind, he hears Mary's spirit speaking to her deceased mentor, Heckle. She tells him that she followed his advice and finally ventured out into the world. A brief memory of a peaceful night sky fills his vision. Her memory recalls the two things Heckle left her, his teachings and the single needle she wielded, and she reflects on how she became free like him, yearning for the life of a wanderer. However, with a hint of sorrow, she questions if she ever truly lived that life. She then remembers a harsh world, filled with monsters stronger than her and walls that couldn't be overcome by will alone. But she still says Heckle, she can say that much. Until the very last moment of her life, there wasn't a single wall in her path that she ever turned away from. She recalls her promise to Heckle that they would meet again in the flames, where she would finally tell him her story. With tears in her spiritual eyes, she begins her story to him. Heckle, I'm... The memory flashes to her running toward her master. And her final thought completes the sentence, a declaration that she is not afraid of the fire anymore. As her soul finds peace, a single final tear escapes, representing the release of all her past burdens. Having fully understood and empathized with her life and unwavering will, Arhan completes the final step as the digestion of the needle is complete. In the quiet aftermath of a desperate duel, embers from a campfire drift into the twilight sky. Arhan's eyes flicker open, the intensity of the recent battle slowly fading as consciousness returns. Lying on the ground, he groans, finally coming to his senses after being overwhelmed in the fight, and he realizes that he must have lost consciousness. As he sits up, he discovers the knight's robe draped over him, a gesture that only deepens the mystery of his opponent's motives. His gaze falls upon the shattered remains of his rapier, and he concludes that, in the end, he had failed to break through the man's defense. He picks up the broken hilt of the needle, his expression hardening with resolve despite his defeat. Just as despair threatens to set in, the spirit of his ancestor, Arhan Karavan, appears, telling him not to be disheartened, and reassures his descendant, proudly stating that his effort was a struggle worthy of the Caravan name. With a knowing grin, Liam teases him, asking if he has yet to notice the profound change that has occurred within him. His ancestor reveals the incredible upside to the defeat. The life-or-death struggle has caused Arhan to completely digest Mary's rapier, the needle. Arhan clenches his fist, marveling at his newfound flexibility, and senses now so sharp they rival a wild beast's. As he processes the change, he feels as if he has become a veteran mercenary who has lived his entire life on the battlefield. He thinks he now understands the master's intention in choosing the sword. It's not just for its strength and technique, and realizes that by consuming the sword, Liam wanted him to experience and inherit the entirety of Mary's life. The ultimate lesson was not about skill, but about absorbing the will to never give up, even in the face of immense trials. However, he has now fully assimilated Mary's indomitable spirit, the true power hidden within her weapon. He sighs, wryly asking his ancestor if it would have hurt to explain things more clearly from the start. But their conversation is cut short as the imposing figure of the Swordwalker suddenly appears before them. The knight calmly notes that Arhan has regained consciousness. Arhan jolts as the Swordwalker says he just went to fetch some drinking water. The knight smiles apologetically, remarking that it seems there are still misunderstandings between them. Despite his new strength, Arhan instinctively jumps into a defensive stance, brandishing the broken hilt as a last resort. Just then, Liam tries to de-escalate the situation, assuring Arhan that the man is not the kind to cause him harm. But Arhan remains tense and suspicious, and Liam concedes that given his descendants' past trauma, his caution is understandable. Even the knight acknowledges Arhan's hesitance, understanding that it can't be easy for him to lower his guard. As a gesture of goodwill, he offers to tell his own story first, hoping to earn the young man's trust. He promises to explain why he came to this desolate land and prove that he is not a threat. Arhan watches in confusion as the man begins to remove his outer garments, wondering what he is doing. At this, the knight asks for permission to formally introduce himself. He then reveals his name is Patel, a retired knight and a wanderer with nowhere left to go. A terminally ill patient on the verge of death. He explains that even high priests have confirmed his fate, giving him a month to live at most, and he is nothing more than a mere sick man waiting for his death. With his vulnerability laid bare, Patel simply asks if Arhan will please listen to his story. Once the tension subsided, the two of them sat down by the fire to talk. Arhan soon discovered that Patel, unlike his swordsmanship, was not very eloquent, often repeating himself and telling his story incoherently. Yet despite his rambling tale, he maintained a gentle, if awkward, smile. Arhan, however, perceived the clumsiness not as a flaw, but as unadorned sincerity, and began to piece together the knight's history. After being diagnosed with a terminal illness, Patel had left the knighthood he was loyal to and set out to find a quiet place to die. He then explained his decision wasn't for some grand reason, he simply didn't want to be a burden to his comrades in his final moments. His only wish was to spend the little time he had left quietly and on his own terms. Arhan listened intently, processing the tragic story of the man he had just fought for his life. Watching from the side, Liam's spirit senses Petal's aura, concluding that there is no falsehood in his words. And his senses confirm this, as he can feel the illness actively devouring Patel's mana heart. He then explains the grim reality. Once the corruption fully encroaches upon the mana heart, Patel's life will inevitably end. Having shared his story, Patel extends his hand toward Arhan and asks what he thinks of his proposal. Arhan stares at the outstretched hand, contemplating the knight's request to be his neighbor. Patel asks plainly whether his honesty alone is enough to qualify him as a neighbor in this empty land. Rising to his feet, Arhan acknowledges that sharing such a personal and painful story could not have been easy. He then firmly grasped Petal's hand, thanking him for his honesty and formally introducing himself as Arhan. As the last resident of this forgotten land, he smiles and officially welcomes Sir Petal to the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Liam's spirit looks on, arms crossed, silently observing his descendants' decision. The ancient swordmaster seems to approve of the young man's judgment and compassion. Having found a guardian for his home, Arhan can now look towards the future. As his heart of steel glows brightly, Petal thanks him for the hospitality. With the matter settled, Liam declares that the time has finally come for Arhan to take the next step in his training. The old spirit thinks to himself that there is no place better suited for Arhan's growth than that place, a place of blood and battle. A few days later, Arhan and Liam set out on a journey, leaving the caravan lands behind. Arhan is sitting with a pensive Liam, finding his ancestors' plan hard to understand. Just then, he questions his ancestor, admitting that he had thought that after becoming a sword beginner, he would receive direct instruction in swordsmanship. Instead, Liam has suddenly insisted that they travel to a mysterious new location. Arhan points out that with Sir Petal now guarding the mansion, there is no need to worry about intruders anymore. Liam simply chides his descendant for still possessing the mindset of an ordinary person, and sternly reminds him that the caravan lineage is special, different from anyone else in the world. He then explains that for someone with the blood of steel, conventional training is secondary to the endless struggle that pushes the body to its absolute limits. His ancestor asserts that the true priorities for a caravan's growth are real combat and the digestion of new swords. With a grim smile, he promises that their destination is the perfect place for Arhan to find the growth he needs. At this, Arhan immediately grasps the nature of their destination, a stage for life-or-death duels, where only those who crave battle gather. Liam declares that back in his era, this legendary battleground was given a name. A vision of brutal combat flashes before Arhan's eyes, warriors clashing in a fight to the death, and he can hear the roar of a bloodthirsty crowd, hungry for a violent spectacle. The vision reveals a massive, Colosseum-like structure, built for glorious and deadly combat. Finally, Liam reveals their destination, a place where legends are forged and broken, the arena. Arhan and his ancestor Liam arrive at their destination, the renowned City of Steel, Firma. As a key city in the Iron Kingdom, its reputation is built on highly developed metallurgy, supplying equipment across the entire nation. The city is a bustling hub for warriors and adventurers, earning it the moniker, the Holy Land of the Sword. However, Liam reveals that the true driving force behind Firma's growth wasn't its forges, but something far more brutal. He points towards a massive coliseum, identifying it as the infamous and blood-soaked arena, and nostalgically remarks that while the arena has changed over time, the name itself still carries a powerful weight. Even he can still feel the palpable heat radiating from the stadium, a familiar sensation that reminds him of the countless struggles that once took place within its walls. He then recounts the various types of duels from his era, from beast versus beast fights, to humans being pitted against wild animals. There were even vicious species duels to decide the superiority between different races like elves and beastmen. But among all the brutal contests, Liam declares that the most violent of them all was the simple combat duel. These weren't mere spars, they were unforgiving brawls where survival was the only prize. Gladiators possessing a variety of techniques would be thrown into the ring to fight like beasts in the dirt, and the rules were simple and merciless. The victor claimed the loser's life and everything they owned as spoils of war. Liam grimly describes the arena of his time as a place of frenzied, bloody fights to the absolute death. Spectators, drunk on the smell of blood, would gamble and roar with excitement, fueling the madness in the pit below. With a dramatic flourish, he proclaims that this is the true nature of Firma, a city of madness built upon the blood spilled by its gladiators. At this, Arhan says, "Certainly, if what my master says is true, then for growing one's power, there is no place better than this." And he sees the opportunity not only to gain combat experience, but also to devour the weapons of defeated gladiators. Liam, however, quickly tempers that enthusiasm, calling his descendants' plan far too simple-minded. He then reminds Arhan that if it were that easy, he would have already had him consume every weapon from the local trash heap to their family heirlooms. His ancestor gravely warns that blindly devouring swords is a path to ruin, as Arhan would soon be consumed by the jumbled memories within. If he isn't careful, he'll be overwhelmed by a storm of conflicting memories and ultimately lose his own identity. He then imparts a crucial lesson that will guide Arhan's growth: the sword must not control you. You should control the sword. Therefore, until Arhan learns to master this process on his own, he must strictly consume only the swords that Liam chooses for him. With the lecture over, the ancient spirit eagerly declares it's time to head into the hot place of struggle. 3 hours later, Arhan finds himself navigating the chaotic entrance to the now organized arena. A smiling receptionist says that since this is Arhan's first time, he will need to register first, who informs him he must get a medal issued before he can enter. Surrounded by intimidating, seasoned gladiators, Arhan is completely taken aback by this unexpected layer of bureaucracy. Confused and out of his element, he mutters to himself, "A medal? What the?" It seems Arhan isn't the only one out of the loop, as his ancient ancestor is just as baffled by the concept. Indeed, the legendary Swordmaster, founder of the caravan line, is completely stumped by this modern development. Liam insists that such a system never existed in his day, leaving both him and a flustered Arhan at a loss. However, the receptionist tells the confused young man to get back in line. These medals, it turns out, are the arena's official ranking system, an indicator of a gladiator's fame, status, and martial power. This new, structured system has a clear hierarchy of classes, starting from the very top. The ranks descend from the prestigious black, white, and platinum medals down to the more common gold and silver. As a complete newcomer with no record, Arhan naturally receives the lowest possible rank, a simple bronze medal. He stares blankly at his less than impressive medal, while Liam observes that a lot has certainly changed over the years. When Arhan says, "Quite unlike your sentiment from a few hours ago," Master Liam defensively retorts that the arena's atmosphere wasn't always so tame and organized. He fondly recalls his era, where anyone, from a helpless scholar to a massive barbarian, was simply shoved into the ring to fight for their life. As they walk, Liam grumbles about the preposterous idea of weight classes, while Arhan correctly deduces it's all been commercialized. Our protagonist reasons that the old way was unsustainable. Endless death matches would deplete the gladiator pool and bore the gambling spectators. And he concludes that for the sake of entertainment and profit, it's better business to match novices against novices and experts against experts. Looking at a posted fight schedule, he accepts that, for better or worse, the times have simply changed. He then reluctantly admits that because of these changes, the arena has transformed from a bloody pit into a symbolic landmark that draws in tourists. He concedes that this shift, however distasteful, was a successful change that allowed the metropolis of Firma to flourish. Walking on, he mentions another new development, an unspoken rule among gladiators that you generally don't take the loser's life. Liam scoffs that while a loser won't be left in one piece, this new civilized approach is a far cry from the lethal brawls of his time. However, he stops complaining as an idea strikes him, admitting this new system might actually be fortunate for Arhan, and explains that a confrontation with an equal enemy will provide good experience and teach a different lesson than his previous overwhelming fights. Until his first match, Liam suggests they browse the local smithies, noting the quality will be far superior to what Arhan is used to. He suddenly halts mid-sentence, remembering that Arhan's current sword is prone to breaking and that they should prepare spares. But before he can finish his thought, his keen senses are drawn to something else nearby. Turning to his descendant, the ancient spirit asks Arhan just what it is they're looking at. Arhan, completely oblivious to what has caught Liam's attention, looks back at him in confusion. Following his ancestor's gaze, Arhan's eyes widen as he finally sees the source of his curiosity. Before them stands a long, ornate wall with dozens of unique and legendary weapons displayed in individual niches. Arhan stares in wonder at the beautifully crafted armaments, each one a work of art. He wonders aloud why so many weapons are being displayed in the middle of the street like monuments. Lost in thought, our protagonist is startled when a man suddenly appears behind him and speaks. An older gentleman with a monocle chuckles, correctly guessing that this is the young man's first time seeing the Hall of Fame. Arhan turns to face the well-dressed and polite stranger. The man introduces himself as Tom, the manager of the hall, and graciously offers to explain the display. Caught off guard by the formal introduction, Arhan hesitates for a moment before responding. Beside him, Liam's spirit studies the manager with a calculating and thoughtful expression. Composing himself, Arhan introduces himself by name and gratefully accepts Tom's offer for an explanation. Tom explains that the armaments on display belong to legendary gladiators who achieved outstanding accomplishments in the arena's past, and clarifies that the weapons are now old and worn, having lost their function as tools of combat, but they are displayed to the honor their fighting spirit. As Arhan quietly takes in the information, Tom kindly offers to answer any other questions he might have. The manager adds that sharing the history of this glorified place is one of his small joys in life. Just then, Liam's voice echoes in Arhan's mind, giving him a very specific instruction. With a greedy glint in his eye, the spirit tells his descendant to ask the manager if there's any way to possess the swords on display. Arhan's eyes widen as he instantly understands his ancestor's true, sword-devouring intention. As Liam declares he found it, the broken blade emanates a powerful purple aura as Liam reveals that this monument is the next sword Arhan must devour. The grand arena stands under the bright sun, a stage for glory and bloodshed. Arhan Karavan strides purposefully through the competitor's entrance, ready for his first trial. With a determined gaze, he steels himself for the challenges that lie ahead within the arena's walls. Inside, Tom, the arena manager, cheerfully informs him that there is indeed a way to obtain the swords displayed in the Hall of Fame, and explains that proven gladiators are granted the right to possess one weapon matching the color of their earned medal. In simpler terms, every time a gladiator's medal rank rises, they are able to claim another weapon. The manager then specifies that the broken blade Arhan has his eyes on is a particularly valuable prize. To claim it, however, our protagonist must first prove his worth and get promoted to silver rank. As they walk away, Liam's spirit declares that the hall is a veritable treasure trove for them. He then explains that while the swords may seem old and useless to others, for a sword devourer like Arhan, they are as valuable as gold. And he is pleased, noting that Arhan now has a clear goal: fight, win promotions, and secure usable swords. However, he laments that stealing them is impossible, as he's identified the manager as no ordinary man. When Arhan questions this, having only seen a kind old gentleman, Liam explains that the power gap between them is simply too vast for him to sense. He then reveals the truth he perceived with his sharpened senses. The manager, Tom, is a mighty sword expert capable of cladding himself in an absolute defense of mana. Arhan is utterly shocked to learn that the friendly manager is a warrior just one step below the rank of Swordmaster. However, Liam simply dismisses his surprise, chalking it up to the common eccentricity of those who reach such a high realm of power. He even jokes that they'll have to put their robbery plans on hold, much to his descendants' disbelief. As they continue on, Liam notes that despite the arena's changes, one core tradition has remained the same. It's a long-standing tradition for fighters to cover their faces, escaping their identities to fight purely as gladiators. Arhan finds merit in this, realizing that anonymity will allow him to fight without hesitation. By facing opponents only as a gladiator, he can be free from the personal burdens that might otherwise hold him back. Before the match, a hooded official approaches and asks what alias he will be using in the arena, and explains that no one uses their real name, as outside identities only become a hindrance to a gladiator. He then instructs the young man to choose a name he can be proud of, one to carry throughout his life as a gladiator. Just then, Arhan's mind flashes to memories of his father and the powerful portrait of his ancestor, Liam Karavan. Standing before the massive gates to the arena floor, he declares the name he has chosen. However, the matchmaker finds the name unfamiliar, musing that it might be from a night novel. Dismissing its origin, the old man simply wishes the young gladiator victory in his first steps. And so, stepping into the light of the stadium, Arhan announces his chosen alias, Liam. Now masked, he prepares to fight not as himself, but under the weight and honor of his ancestor's name. He finds himself in the vast, intimidating expanse of the combat arena. Since he's in the lowest bronze rank, the only spectators are a handful of petty gamblers. These initial matches are nothing more than filler to pass the time between the major events. And therefore, what fills the stadium at this time is not enthusiastic cheers or applause. Instead, he is met with a barrage of terrible boos and harsh criticism from the bored crowd. The gamblers shout angrily, demanding the fight get started and finished quickly. And they heckle him, calling him a beanpole and telling him to just die if he's going to be weak and boring. Observing the scene, Liam remarks that this contempt for the weak is a fitting display for a kingdom where only the strong rule. When his ancestor asks if he's intimidated, Arhan defiantly states he isn't, a mindset Liam approves of. Liam then delivers a heavy reminder to his young descendant. By taking his name, Arhan is now shouldering the entire history and honor of the Karavan family. With a chilling resolve, our protagonist accepts the burden, determined to win no matter what. His opponent, a hulking brute named Temur, takes his place in the center of the arena. Just then, the arena announcer begins his introductions, eager to hype up what he calls a shabby fight. He points to Arhan, mocking him as a rookie among rookies with nothing to show for himself, and then formally introduces the greenhorn gladiator making his arena debut, Liam. After that, he turns his attention to the other fighter, a man who has brutally killed every gladiator he's faced. The announcer bellows the name of the man with 3 consecutive wins, the giant gladiator, Temur. Temur flashes a cruel, confident grin, ready for his next victim. With both fighters ready, the announcer dedicates the sacred match to the goddess Lepre. Temur scoffs at his opponent's name, calling Liam a stupid name for a kid. Finding the name so weak and unimpressive, he decides it would be a waste to even use his sword on someone like Arhan. Just then, he steps forward to make a humiliating proposal to his much smaller opponent. Temur tells him to take off his mask, drop his sword, and dance to the beat of his clapping. If he complies, Temur promises that out of special generosity, he will preserve his slender neck. At this, Arhan mentions the unspoken rule against killing, but his opponent just laughs at his naive belief. Temur roars that he doesn't care about rules, boasting that he was raised where men who lose are always killed. And he proudly admits that's exactly what he did to his 3 previous opponents. With a chilling grin, he specifies that he snapped their necks with his own 2 hands. When asked why he goes so far, Temur reveals his brutal philosophy. He kills because it's the winner's rightful privilege and, more importantly, the best entertainment. However, he deems Arhan too insignificant to provide any enjoyment from being killed, and he cruelly tells the young man to shake his girl-like body to at least make the audience laugh so the fight isn't a total bore. This public humiliation, Temur declares, will be the price for his life. The announcer loves the pre-match tension, excitedly declaring that the spectacle might become interesting after all. He then officially calls for both gladiators to take their positions. As Temur raises his greatsword, the match is set to begin immediately. But before the fight can start, Arhan interrupts, stating that he also has a proposal. Fixing his gaze on Temur, he quietly demands that his opponent take back the mockery of the name Liam. In return for this apology, he offers a chilling promise. He will grant Temur a comfortable death. At this, Temur is momentarily stunned into silence by the rookie's audacious threat. His shock quickly turns to amusement as a smirk spreads across his face. Then he bursts into laughter, sarcastically mocking the threat and pretending to be scared. The onlooking gamblers jeer, wondering if the kid read his lines from some third-rate night novel. The crowd taunts him relentlessly, cruelly asking if Liam was the name of his dead father. Temur, enjoying the crowd's energy, tells Arhan that now it'll be hard for him to go easy. However, he offers one final chance for his opponent to listen obediently and accept his humiliating terms. As he speaks, his eyes gleam with sadistic anticipation, drool dripping from his sneer. But before Temur can finish his threat, Arhan explodes into motion, slicing the giant's hand and drawing first blood. With blood spraying, he coldly repeats his ultimatum one last time and demands that he apologize for insulting his name. His eyes blaze with deadly intent as he finishes his sentence, "If you want to die comfortably." Temur, trembling with rage at the rookie's sheer audacity, can barely stammer out a response. He finally explodes, lunging forward with his massive sword while screaming, "You bastard!" However, Arhan meets the devastating, ground-shattering attack head-on, effortlessly parrying the massive blade. Sliding back from the force, he holds his ground, having completely nullified the powerful blow. Temur is left stunned and straining, having put all his strength into an attack that was so casually blocked. The force of the impact is so great that his own hand begins to bleed from the reverberation. He lets out a roar of pain and frustration as his hand throbs from the injury. Meanwhile, the once jeering crowd can only look on in stunned silence, completely baffled by this turn of events. A wave of shock and awe spreads through the arena as the rookie defies all expectations. Breathing heavily, Temur wonders what in the world is going on. And he remembers how just moments ago, the boy was trembling, looking like a complete amateur. However, he can't comprehend how that same boy is now fighting back with such skill. Then, the horrifying truth dawns on him. The rookie was acting weak on purpose to lure him in. A menacing silhouette of his opponent now stands before him, the boy's entire demeanor having changed. Arhan reveals his ruse, coolly asking if it's cowardly to exploit an opening he created by lowering his opponent's guard. Temur realizes with a jolt that Arhan is throwing his own words back in his face. This is not child's play. Gritting his teeth in a snarl of pure fury, the gladiator is pushed past his breaking point. He curses the boy as a sneaky bastard, his grip tightening on his greatsword for another attack. Driven by rage, he unleashes a wild flurry of attacks, screaming that he'll kill him. But Arhan is a completely different fighter now, elegantly dodging every desperate swing. At this, Temur can only curse in frustration as none of his powerful attacks can even touch him. He watches in disbelief as the rookie evades his blade again and again. Every dodge is perfect, avoiding the lethal swings by a paper-thin margin. His movements are so precise that Temur feels like he's fighting a phantom. Panting for breath, the veteran gladiator stares at him, wondering what kind of monster he truly is. In his terrified imagination, Arhan transforms into a giant, unhittable serpent, and he is the helpless prey. Just then, Arhan dashes forward to attack the Temur. After closing the distance instantly, he slides beside him, creating an opening for attack, and prepares his rapier for the fatal blow, landing a brutal, precise strike on the gladiator's leg and snapping the bone. Temur can only grunt in agony as a sharp pain shoots up his leg. To avoid further damage, Temur swings his sword, but our guy dodges it by creating distance from him. Now, our guy is ready to end the fight. His glowing blue eyes are cold and devoid of emotion as he looks down at his foe. Helpless and defeated, Temur kneels, gasping for breath, and collapses to the ground, his leg unable to support him after being fatally wounded. Even he is now unable to hold his sword, which falls to the ground. The crippled gladiator is utterly defeated. Arhan walks calmly towards the fallen warrior, his victory now certain. Looming over his beaten foe, he declares that he'll make him another offer, and cruelly throws his own words back at him, ordering him to take off his ridiculous helmet and dance to his clapping. With a chillingly empty expression, he makes his humiliating demand, dance for him. As the spirit of his ancestor and the announcer watch, Arhan promises to spare the gladiator's useless head if he complies. Terrified and broken, Temur can only recoil in fear from the boy's cold proposition. He stammers, completely at a loss for words at the sheer humiliation of the offer. Finally, he seems to accept, begging for just a moment to catch his breath, and pretends he can't breathe while planning his next move, as he tries to pick up a stone from the ground to attack. But without a moment's hesitation, our guy brutally impales his hand, pinning it to the ground as well. As Temur notices his hand, his eyes bulge as he is overwhelmed by excruciating pain. Leaning in close, Arhan whispers for him to choose his next move carefully, and gives his final ultimatum: there won't be any more offers, leaving the gladiator paralyzed with the fear of imminent death. The two remain in the silent arena, one a triumphant victor and the other a broken man. At last, Temur relents completely, apologizing for insulting Arhan's name and pathetically begging for his life. In the stands, the spectators stare at each other, unable to believe what they've just witnessed. A stunned silence hangs over the entire crowd. Suddenly, that silence is shattered by an explosion of cheers and excitement. The audience goes wild, praising the amazing rookie and celebrating the money they won betting on the underdog. Now, firm believers, the spectators excitedly ask for the name of the new gladiator they plan to bet on. The announcer proudly declares the victor's name, the little gladiator, Liam. As Arhan walks out of the arena, the stadium echoes with the thunderous chant of his new name, Liam. Watching from his seat, the manager Tom admits he felt the boy was extraordinary from the start. And he's pleased, realizing he's just formed a connection with a very promising and popular new gladiator. However, his expression turns serious as he notes that excessive attention in the arena is often dangerous. His gaze drifts up to the private boxes where shadowy figures watch the proceedings. Therefore, he grimly concludes that for a rising star, unwanted attention from the wrong people can be like poison. Some days pass under a calm, clear sky. A few days after his spectacular debut, Arhan is back at the arena. He is approached by arena staff and looks up, surprised by their proposition. The receptionist cheerfully confirms what she just told the disbelieving Arhan. She explains that because the arena evaluated his performance so highly, they are making him an unprecedented offer. He is given a rare opportunity to bypass the lower ranks entirely and fight in a silver rank promotion match. In the 2 days since his debut match against Temur, Arhan reflects that he has fought 3 more times. In those 3 matches, he has won them all, quickly climbing the ranks. But he questions the arena receptionist, asking if her special offer is purely out of goodwill for his performance. Glancing at his ancestor spirit, he feels that something about the offer is very wrong, and Liam's spiritual presence silently confirms his descendant's suspicions. Just then, the receptionist explains that the condition for promotion is simple. He just has to duel a contestant of the arena's choosing. She even emphasizes that he doesn't need to fight hard, piquing his curiosity. The victory condition, she explains, is simply to endure for 3 minutes after the match starts. She then adds a bit of pressure, remarking on how rare and special this opportunity is. She explains that the perks of becoming a silver rank fighter include facing incomparably stronger opponents and receiving much higher match fees, all for just surviving for 3 minutes. She concludes her tempting offer, asking Mr. Liam for his decision. Yet, a sinister glint in her smile reveals the offer is not as good as it sounds. After that, she leans in, pressing the deal by asking if he truly realizes what a tremendous opportunity he's being given. Liam's spirit immediately identifies this scheme as rookie stomping, an old, cruel tradition from the arena's past. He then explains that it's a procedure designed to publicly break cunning and efficient rookies like him. The whole point is a special event for the cruel entertainment of the audience, who delight in watching promising newcomers get crushed. By luring a rookie with the bait of promotion against an unbeatable foe, it becomes a public spectacle of them being toyed with. He grimly concludes that it isn't a match, it's a public execution. Because of that, he advises his descendant that if he wishes to avoid humiliation, he should refuse the offer, as a proper promotion will come eventually. He then asks what his decision will be. But with unwavering resolve, Arhan believes the answer is obvious. And he accepts the challenge, declaring he will gladly go against whoever the opponent is. 2 days later, the arena sends a wax-sealed letter officially notifying him of his promotion match opponent. His opponent's alias is the Black Bride, an undefeated silver rank fighter from a prestigious academy, but most alarmingly, she is also a powerhouse swordwalker. The academy she hails from is the most premier institution for swordsmen, where a diploma alone is enough to earn the rank of knight. This means he is facing an opponent who is overwhelmingly superior to him in every conceivable way. After doing some research, our guy tells Liam that the Black Bride is notorious for her overwhelming skill. Worse still, it's said that every single opponent she has faced has been rendered unable to recover from their injuries. Liam scoffs, realizing the arena management is so determined to make an example of him that even surviving for 3 minutes seems impossible. He struggles to recall the modern slang for such a dire situation. Then, much to Arhan's annoyance, his ancestor declares, "They say you're screwed." When Arhan questions the assessment, pointing out that she is likely no stronger than Petal, the swordwalker he already faced, Liam concedes the point but reminds him that Petal, though frail, was a powerhouse who had reached the pinnacle of swordwalkers. The critical difference, he explains, is that Patel held back out of honor, tailoring the fight to Arhan's level. The Black Bride, on the other hand, will offer no such tolerance and will aim to utterly destroy him. At this, Arhan can only dryly thank his ancestor for the encouraging reality check. Despite the grim odds, he holds on to his faith, knowing that his master never lies when it comes to swords. Steeling his resolve, he puts his trust in his steel mana heart and the experience gained from Mary's memories. Believing he has what it takes, Arhan walks through the city, confident he can endure for 3 minutes. As he contemplates his chances, however, his sharp senses detect a presence behind him. A hooded figure calls out to him by his arena alias, the Little Gladiator, Liam. Removing her hood, a young woman with dark hair asks, "That's you, right?" Arhan is caught completely off guard by her sudden appearance. With a dawning horror, he realizes he couldn't sense her presence at all, a feat that should be impossible. A cold sweat runs down his neck as he turns to face the mysterious woman. He takes in her features, pitch black hair, and an Eastern-style sword. The realization hits him like a lightning bolt. This must be his opponent, the Black Bride. Unsure of her intentions, he decides to feign ignorance and deny his identity. And he plays dumb, claiming she has the wrong person and has never heard of the Little Gladiator. The Black Bride stares at him blankly, entirely unconvinced by his act. Sighing at his defiance, she states, "You're making this troublesome." As she moves to draw her blade, Arhan reacts instantly to defend himself. But before his hand can even reach his hilt, he is shocked by her blinding speed. Then, in a single fluid motion, she presses her blade against his neck. She coldly warns him not to waste her time, having utterly dominated their brief encounter. And she reveals that she confirmed his identity, both from his split-second reaction and from the unique, needle-like sword he carries. Her keen perception is absolute as she tells him, "You can't deceive my eyes." She then tells him to lower his guard, stating she only came to make him a proposal. Her proposition is a single, chilling command: forfeit the match. She warns him not to make a foolish choice that he will regret. As she turns to leave, she gives him one last threat: "Don't make me ruin your future." Unwilling to be cowed, Arhan calls out, asking what she intends to do if he participates anyway. She pauses for a moment before walking away, leaving him with a final, ominous warning. With a menacing look, she promises that if he fights, he will pay the price. Later that night, the arena manager Tom stands alone contemplating the legendary swords in the Hall of Fame. Hearing footsteps, he smiles knowingly, sensing the arrival of a welcome guest. As Arhan approaches, Tom greets him and asks what brings him there at such a late hour. Arhan bows respectfully, apologizing for visiting unannounced at such a late hour. He then prefaces his visit by admitting he's about to make a shameful request. With determination burning in his eyes, he asks if he could take one of the legendary swords from the hall with him. The scene flashes back to the past. Refusing to be intimidated, Arhan calmly asks what she'll do if he decides to participate in the match anyway. At this, she turns her back on him, leaving him with a final, chilling warning before she departs, and promises that if he shows up to the fight, he will be made to pay the price for his defiance. Because no mercy should be shown to an enemy faced with a sword. And her final words to him are, "Judge wisely." Left alone in the empty square, his resolve to fight is now set in stone. Watching the exchange, Liam praises the Black Bride's talent, noting that most swordsmen's careers end when they hit the wall of becoming a swordwalker. But for that girl, it wouldn't even be a small obstacle, let alone a wall. He then predicts that with a bit of luck, she's not far from reaching the next realm of swordsmanship, because she is a genius. Arhan reflects on the immense power gap, realizing just how formidable his opponent must be for even the strict Liam to offer such high praise. Just then, in his mind, he pictures a long, treacherous bridge stretching into the heavens, symbolizing the vast gap between his current strength and hers. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, his unique mana heart glows with a defiant purple light. Steeling his resolve, he declares to himself that giving up is simply not an option. Liam watches his descendant's unwavering determination, a look of quiet approval on his face. Knowing they have a plan to concoct, he urges the young man to hurry along, as time isn't on their side. The scene shifts to the present. That night, Arhan and Tom stand before the Hall of Fame, where Arhan hopes to find a second sword to even the odds. and he makes an unprecedented request, boldly asking the arena manager if he can borrow a sword from the hall. Tom is stunned into silence by the audacious request to take a legendary weapon. He silently contemplates what could possibly drive the young gladiator to ask for such a thing. He then quickly puts the pieces together, correctly deducing that the request is related to the young man's promotion match against the Black Bride. Arhan confirms, and the manager notes that news of the high-profile match is already making waves everywhere. However, Tom shrewdly assesses that the arena planners have played a nasty trick on the promising rookie. Out of genuine concern, he strongly advises Arhan to reconsider participating in the fight, and explains the Black Bride's intimidating background, revealing she hails from the East Continent, a land famous for its supreme martial talent. He continues, stating that she graduated at the top of her class from one of the Iron Kingdom's 3 great academies, proving her talent. Having overwhelmed countless gladiators in the arena, she is, as he puts it, a genius in both name and reality. While he acknowledges Arhan's own excellent qualities, he warns that it's far too early for him to face such a raging wave. After that, he suggests that Arhan gain more experience and strength before challenging the torrent that is the Black Bride, and guarantees that if he waits, he'll be able to display an even more splendid match in the future. At this, Arhan respectfully thanks the manager for his sincere advice, but his decision is already made. Despite knowing the overwhelming danger, he calmly states his intention to face the challenge head-on. But he admits his body trembles in fear, and that he cannot even fathom the height of the wave he is about to confront. However, as a follower of the goddess Lepri, he declares that avoiding combat due to fear would be a betrayal of his faith. In a passionate speech, he claims that backing down would be a betrayal of his very own gladiator heart. He then explains that he came to the Hall of Fame, despite the shame of asking, to borrow courage for the fight, and he hopes to receive energy from the legendary swords of the gladiators who fought so greatly in the past. So he lays out a simple proposition: if he survives, he earns the right to the sword; if he dies, Tom can simply retrieve it. He humbly concludes, telling the manager to simply shake his head if the request is too much trouble. With a disarming smile, he brushes off his own passionate speech as mere greed for a bit of courage, a move that clearly moves the old manager. Tom turns away for a moment, silently processing the young man's earnest and heartfelt plea. He begins his reply by stating that, according to the official rules, granting the request is absolutely impermissible. However, as the manager entrusted with the souls of the enshrined gladiators, he cannot ignore Arhan's sincerity, which he deems more gladiator-like than anyone he's ever seen. Moved by the young man's unwavering spirit, he extends his hand and declares that he will grant his request. When a shocked Arhan worries that Tom will get in trouble, the manager confidently reassures him that he has plenty of authority to gift him this courage. He then wipes away a tear, admitting that seeing such a wonderful gladiator after so long has made him emotional. Arhan bows deeply in gratitude, profusely thanking him for his kindness and support. As Arhan continues to thank the manager, Liam watches silently from the side. He chuckles to himself, realizing his descendant is overflowing with more talent for persuasion than for swordsmanship, and muses that if the boy had chosen to be an actor, he would have found success long ago. With the conditions met, all that remains now is for Arhan to consume the broken sword's power before the match. The next day arrives, and the city awakens to the looming shadow of the arena where the promotion match is set to take place. The crowd roars with excitement on the day of the match between the up-and-coming Little Gladiator and the undefeated Black Bride. The Black Bride makes her grand entrance, adorned in her signature veil and ready for combat. She recalls the conversation she had with the arena staff before the match. They had informed her that her opponent would be the rookie known as the Little Gladiator. However, she had scoffed at the request to trample someone who is merely a sword beginner. The arena receptionist cheerily confirmed the request, adding that the planners also want her to cut off one of the rookie's arms or legs. The planners, the receptionist relayed, believed that brutally crippling him would make for a good spectacle. The Black Bride had coolly questioned if they truly thought she would accept such a dishonorable proposal. In response, the receptionist feigned sympathy, acknowledging that such a task would surely be displeasing. However, the planners had offered an irresistible bribe, the fabled dragon sword of the East Continent, as a reward for her compliance. The mention of the legendary sword from her homeland had left the Black Bride completely stunned. The receptionist then knowingly pointed out that the sword holds great meaning for the swordsmen of the East Continent. In fact, obtaining this very sword is one of the primary reasons she fights as a gladiator in the arena. Taking her silence as acceptance, the receptionist had cheerfully told her to give them a good match. Back in the present, she stands in the arena, having accepted the planner's dirty deal. She justifies her decision as simply accepting a proposal she couldn't refuse, viewing her earlier warning to the boy as the only mercy she could offer. She then remembers telling him to withdraw, a warning she gave as a human, not a gladiator, which he ultimately ignored. Arhan makes his entrance, walking slowly and deliberately onto the arena floor. She stands her ground, ready to face the opponent she has been paid to destroy, and addresses him coolly, remarking that in the end, he came anyway. Our guy approaches, now blindfolded and wielding the broken sword he was given. The Black Bride unsheathes her sword, her eyes flashing with menace as she warns him that what happens next is his own fault. Her eye glints with killing intent as she prepares to strike. But suddenly, an explosive wave of terrifying red energy erupts from Arhan, catching her completely off guard. She is shocked by the sudden, overwhelming pressure emanating from the supposed rookie. As she's confronted by the immense, terrible smell of blood as a demonic visage forms in the air behind him. Because of that, she stares in disbelief, wondering how such a terrifying aura could possibly come from that boy. Channeling the power of the consumed sword, Arhan's single visible eye glows with an eerie purple light. Speaking with a voice not his own, he introduces himself as a resident of the Free City crowd. He fully embodies the spirit of the sword's previous owner, a freedom fighter who willingly stained himself with blood to reclaim freedom. Arhan experiences the memories of the consumed sword, which begin with a serene sunrise over the once beautiful city of Crowd. This city, once known as a paradise, is the setting for a tragic history. Established as one of the 6 free cities after splitting from an ancient republic, Crowd's origins were noble. Its stunning beauty earned it the name Paradise, a vibrant land cherished by its people. However, the freedom fighter's memory clarifies that this idyllic past is long gone, and the present-day Crowd is a city where all hope has vanished. Its citizens are shown living in destitution, suffering under the rule of wealthy nobles. The beautiful paradise has degenerated into nothing more than a terrible, oppressive land. The fall of Crowd began with the insatiable corruption and bottomless greed of its nobles. Blinded by their lust for luxury, they sold the city's territory to a foreign power, the Golden Empire. Eventually, they stooped so low as to use the citizens' own human rights as collateral for massive loans. As a result, the people of Crowd lost their rights and dignity, as seen through the eyes of a young boy, and this corrupt deal sealed their fate, reducing the entire populace to the status of slaves. The young freedom fighter recalls constantly questioning the horrific reality he was forced to live in. He remembers his father being beaten to death simply for begging for food. Then he witnessed his mother selling her body just so her children wouldn't starve. And he grieved for his sister, who died from a fever because they lacked the few copper coins needed for medicine. The memory shows the young boy sitting alone in a dark room, mourning by his deceased sister's bedside. Overwhelmed by loss, he desperately questions why his people are forced to live such a miserable existence. However, he found his grim answer in an unexpected place, the public execution grounds. There, a crowd gathers to watch another soul be lost to the state's cruel justice. A terrified man is locked into a guillotine, awaiting his sentence. His charge was assault. A drunken tourist had tormented him until he could no longer endure the abuse. In a moment of desperation, the citizen chose to resist his tormentor. While bloodshed was common, an outsider becoming the victim was an unprecedented crime in the city. So, to appease the great powers and make an example of him, Crowd's rulers ordered a public execution. The guillotine falls, a brutal display of power meant to quell any thoughts of rebellion. Despite the clear injustice, the watching citizens felt no sympathy for their executed neighbor. They remained silent, fearing that any protest would only bring harsher violence down upon them. But the next day, an eerie silence fell over the streets of Crowd. There were no screams of protest or grief. For days, the city remained unnervingly peaceful and quiet. This unfamiliar, heavy silence continued to hang over the once vibrant city. The reason for the silence was simple, yet profound. The outsiders, who had previously seen the citizens as mere slaves, were now looking at them differently. That single act of resistance had planted a seed of fear in their oppressors' eyes. Now, the people of Crowd appeared to be dangerous beings, capable of fighting back. This newfound fear showed that the citizens were not toothless, they were hiding sharp fangs. Therefore, the young freedom fighter realized that they had the power to change their fate and break the shackles that bound them. Even he realized that, by standing by and doing nothing, they were all accomplices to the violence and despair in their city. Their single unifying charge was the sin of not resisting. While the corrupt nobles toast to their wealth, the freedom fighter accepts that freedom has a price, and concludes that for change to occur, someone must be willing to spill blood and be stained by it. Watching the decadent party from a rooftop, he decides that he will willingly become that someone. He takes up his blade to fight for the freedom that belonged to everyone and to atone for their collective inaction. Under the full moon, he fully embraces his new path as an assassin. And he fights not just for freedom or atonement, but for the lost paradise that Crowd once was. As the memory of the freedom fighter's resolve fades, Arhan finds himself back in the arena, clutching the assassin's dagger. Just then, the announcer kicks off the duel between the Black Bride and the little gladiator, Arhan. With a roar from the crowd, the announcer declares the match has begun. The Black Bride observes her opponent, sensing a dramatic shift in his aura, and recalls that he initially had the air of a simple mercenary, but now he stands before her completely changed. She now sees someone who has been stained with blood in the shadows. In her eyes, Arhan is no longer a rookie gladiator, but a deadly assassin. She is momentarily taken aback by this sudden transformation. Shaking off her confusion, she resolves that while the situation is difficult to understand, ultimately, nothing has changed. Just then, she dashes forward to strike. Confident in her attack, the Black Bride believes Arhan won't be able to react. But Arhan, channeling the assassin's reflexes, meets her blade head-on. With newfound agility, he slips past her guard and effortlessly dodges her sword, a feat that should have been far beyond his capabilities. The Black Bride is stunned, unable to comprehend how he dodged an attack that was impossible to avoid, because she knows that with his previous movements and reactions, he shouldn't have even been able to respond. Arhan gracefully lands, his movements precise and controlled like a seasoned killer. She realizes with a jolt that she is facing a completely different person. Arhan smirks as he readies himself to attack her. He tightens his grip on his sword, preparing for a true battle. As he attacks, his speed and ferocity completely catching her off guard. To deflect the attack, she also swings her sword. As the swords clash, the force of their exchange sends sparks flying across the stage. However, the Black Bride recognizes that his breathing and movements now belong entirely to someone else. Staring at him as he leaps for the attack, the utterly bewildered Black Bride demands, "Who on earth are you?" The battle between Arhan and the Black Bride begins, with he launching the first swift attack. But she swiftly dodges it. He then launches a flurry of attacks. As she easily dodges them, she notes that fighting him feels like taking on an assassin and a mercenary at the same time. And while she acknowledges his relentless and unpredictable stances, she ultimately dismisses him as a mere beginner. His varied fighting style makes him hard to read, adding a level of extreme unpredictability to his moves. However, as his blade nears, she realizes with a shock that he has long surpassed the level of a beginner. As she deflects the attack with her sword, a spark erupts in reaction. He, however, remains unfazed, glaring back at his opponent with cold determination. The impact of the blow leaves a smoking scar. Surrounded by a menacing red aura, she dismisses his tenacity as nothing more than foolhardiness. Suddenly, a flash of bloodlust from the consumed sword overwhelms Arhan's senses. Just then, he leaps back as the assassin's memories start to take control. The Black Bride calmly prepares for his assault, challenging him to show her more of his hidden cards. The whole arena ground is filled with the roars of the audience because of the fierce match. One spectator shouts in disbelief that a low-ranked bronze gladiator is putting up such an incredible fight against the Black Bride. Another fan who bet his entire fortune on Arhan screams in vindication, his gamble paying off spectacularly. In the stands, the crowd buzzes with the possibility of an upset, though some remain confident in the undefeated Black Bride. A fan yells out, urging the little gladiators not to have a boring death, encapsulating the arena's thirst for a good show. Inside his own mind, he desperately fights to control the assassin's overwhelming killing intent. He's assaulted by a killing intent so cold it could freeze the very soul. The phantom scent of blood fills his senses, seeming to blanket the entire arena, and he realizes that he's seeing the world through the eyes of Fang's old master, the assassin of crowd. Liam's spirit appears before him, explaining that he is experiencing the lives of both the mercenary swordswoman and the assassin. His ancestor knows that both of their swords were forged in the crucible of battle against enemies far stronger than themselves. He then calls them swords of struggle, and worries that accepting an assassin's brutal life may be too overwhelming for a novice like Arhan. Therefore, his ancestor's spirit delivers a stark warning: do not be consumed. Liam instructs him that he must fully understand and accept the assassin's life to make that power his own. Taking a deep breath, Arhan focuses his mind and begins to regain control from the sword's memories. His eyes regain their clarity as his own will suppresses the borrowed bloodlust. At this, Liam nods in satisfaction, but warns him that with his opponent now aware of his skills, the true trial is about to begin. From their brief exchange, the Black Bride has already grasped the full extent of his current capabilities. Now, she intends to hunt him down with all her might, no longer holding back. Arhan crouches, readying himself for her now serious assault. He quickly assesses his situation, realizing the open arena is a terrible place for an assassin with nowhere to hide. Knowing she won't be letting her guard down again, he resolves that his best option is a tactical retreat. and so he quickly dashes away, attempting to create a more advantageous distance between them. His plan is simple: buy time and use the 3-minute match limit to his advantage. As he puts distance between them, he believes his strategy is working. But in a blur of motion, the Black Bride appears directly before him, calling his attempt pointless. Arhan's eyes widen in absolute shock at her impossible speed. He can't comprehend how she is able to close such a vast distance in an instant. The entire stadium looks on as the power dynamic of the fight shifts dramatically. Watching from his box, Tom the manager laments that the young gladiator doesn't understand the true power of a swordwalker, and explains that a swordwalker projects a path to create a domain of absolute advantage. Furthermore, they expand that path internally to wield tremendous superhuman power. Arhan sees this firsthand as the Black Bride, now a true superhuman, closes in. She moves with blinding speed, becoming a blur as she swings her sword. An attack he barely manages to dodge. The fight continues as their swords clash and sparks erupt. However, our guy realizes this is her true power, completely incomparable to her strength at the start of the match, and explains that ordinary swordsmanship always leaves openings between attacks. There is meant to be an unavoidable gap, a moment of weakness, when one resets their stance. However, the Black Bride's sword has no such gap, as her next attack flows seamlessly from the last, and he can only compare her flawless, continuous attacks to an artist painting a world upon a canvas. Her movements are like the elegant, flowing brushstrokes of a master painter, beautiful, yet deadly. She relentlessly presses her assault, leaving him no room to breathe or counter, and amplifies her attack, putting all her might into it. Gritting his teeth, he desperately holds his ground, blocking her powerful blow. Just then, Liam identifies her unique and powerful technique as the Sword of the East, and explains that it's a style of martial arts from the Eastern continent with mysterious movements that resemble nature itself. Her elegant footwork and delicate sword trajectories are core components of this style. All of her movements, Liam elaborates, connect into a single, flowing motion that draws beautiful curves. But her graceful style can also shift in an instant, crashing down with the force of a powerful wave. Liam warns that the very moment her beautiful flowing movements finally stop. Therefore, Arhan's eyes lock onto a single, momentary opening in her perfect form, is the instant she will deliver the final, decisive blow. In that one critical moment, he seizes his only chance, declaring, "Caught you." But just then, the memories of the assassin's sword reveal his past, fighting for freedom in a city that had turned into a rotting mire. His was a life dedicated to reclaiming his people's freedom, even if it meant staining his own hands with blood. The assassin was constantly hunted, living every moment with death just a breath away. He waged a one-man war against the corrupt bureaucrats who had ruined his home. To survive, he shouldered the heavy burden of constantly running and hiding. He ran and ran, never finding a moment's peace. However, his luck eventually ran out when he found himself cornered. There, the assassin learned a hard lesson: running doesn't always lead to an escape route, and he was confronted by a powerful enforcer, an opponent he knew he couldn't possibly defeat. This undeniable powerhouse stood before him, emanating an aura of pure strength. His attack was a whirlwind of motion, seemingly impossible to escape. In that moment, the assassin instinctively knew his life had reached its end. As the final, lethal blow descended upon him, his fate seemed sealed. But then, in the path of the attack, he noticed a tiny, almost imperceptible circle. This strange circle felt oddly familiar, a flicker of recognition in the face of death. It reminded him of the twisted back alleys of the city, the secret paths that had always let him escape overwhelming violence. Using his unique street smarts, he kicked the wall and leapt, evading the strike. And the attacker's sword got stuck in the wall. He then stood on the attacker's sword that was pinned into the wall. Using the wall for leverage, he spun his knife. He decided to give this life-saving phenomenon a fitting name. And as the enforcer realized his mistake, the assassin prepared to strike. He called it an opening. Back in the present, Arhan dodges the powerful attack and slashes her. As he passes by her side, the assassin's memory reveals his unique talent for turning the tables. He acknowledged that his talent wasn't that of a noble warrior, but the raw instinct of a gutter rat, a nickname his brothers gave him. In the art of pure survival, the freedom fighter was a true genius. However, the Black Bride is astonished, realizing that Arhan has somehow pierced her perfect path and escaped in a split second. But what will he do now? He internally admits that his opponent is overwhelmingly powerful, more so than anyone he has ever faced. Even he understands that while the assassin fought strong foes, the Black Bride is on an entirely different level. In their brief exchange, she not only dodged a fatal blow but also managed to land a powerful counterattack. As a result, he feels like his ribs will break even if he moves just a little in this state. let alone using the assassin's techniques or the mercenary's arts. Even creating distance is impossible. As the last sliver of hope vanishes, he knows the wise and logical choice would be to forfeit the match. Spectators, including his friend Kun, can only watch in dismay, expecting him to surrender. He reasons that by forfeiting, he can save his life and get another chance at promotion later. However, as he grips the hilt of his broken sword, his resolve hardens. Just then he reminds himself of his identity. I am a caravan. Recalling his family's pride and his ancestors' teachings, he decides that the weak option to forfeit simply doesn't exist for him. The arena announcer is beside himself, shocked that a mere bronze not only wounded the undefeated queen but is going to continue fighting. He realizes this is no longer a simple rookie stomping or an execution ceremony. With gleaming eyes, the announcer understands he is witnessing the birth of a star. Grinning maniacally, he hypes up the crowd, asking if they're watching this historic moment, and roars that only 10 seconds remain until the little gladiator's potential victory. The final countdown begins, just 10 seconds left in the match. The two gladiators face each other, ready for one final desperate clash. Watching from above, Liam's spirit reflects on his descendant's incredible performance. He calmly poses a question to himself: what is a genius? As the Black Bride launches her attack, Liam's thoughts drift. A genius, he muses, is someone who can always find a path, even in the midst of the most severe hardship. They are those who consistently find answers when faced with impossible trials, and they calmly achieve success, making the impossible look effortless. These are the people who engrave their legendary achievements into the annals of history. Yet Liam sadly admits that by this definition, his descendant Arhan's talent falls short of being a true genius. Arhan's innate body is frail and his senses are dull. Where others learn 10 things, he barely manages to grasp 2 or 3. Despite the agony, our hero pushes through the limits of his body. Liam acknowledges that this is the harsh limit of the vessel Arhan was born with. However, Liam's monologue continues, there are those in this world who are praised as greater than geniuses. These individuals may not always find the perfect, elegant answer to their problems, but they are defined by their unyielding spirit. They never give up and always stand firm against adversity. They are known as legends, the ones who create massive, world-changing ripples. They are the true heroes, forged in the fires of tribulation. And to Liam, his descendant, Arhan Karavan, is one of them. He recalls Arhan's darkest moments, utterly alone in a deep abyss without a single ray of light. Even then, after losing everything, Arhan never once let go of his sword. With immense pride, he recognizes the true strength of his descendant. You, Liam begins, as Arhan makes his final move. Arhan charges forward, clashing with the Black Bride one last time. The Black Bride's eyes widen in shock at Arhan's impossible final gambit. Possessed the qualities to become a hero, Liam concludes with certainty. Channeling his indomitable will, Arhan puts every last ounce of his strength into his broken blade. His dagger glows with a powerful blue and purple aura, a testament to his resolve. Recalling the assassin's memories, he wonders, is this how it was done? As she dodges the attack, she is taken aback by his bizarre, dance-like movements that defy all convention. In a stunning final move, she plunges her sword into his chest. Spitting blood, a triumphant and manic grin spreads across his face as he secures his victory. The Black Bride can only look down in disbelief, her perfect record shattered. Liam remarks that while the attack fell a bit short, there's no need for Arhan to be disappointed. The announcer's voice booms across the arena. M-Match and Liam's spirit proudly proclaims, today you have, once again, overcome. The crowd erupts as the announcer declares the little gladiator, Liam, the victor. As the crowd roars, the arena announcer declares that the little gladiator has won and is being promoted to the silver rank. And in response, the entire stadium erupts in celebration of his shocking victory. Meanwhile, battered and bloodied, our protagonist lies unconscious on the arena floor after his hard-fought win. His opponent, the Black Bride, stands silently over him, contemplating the outcome of their duel. She reflects on her own nature, admitting that when she holds a sword, it's difficult to suppress her violent instincts. It's a dangerous combination of what some would call talent, and what others would call madness and violence. Gripping her sword, she admits to herself that it's been a long time since a fight has excited her this much. Her curiosity piqued by the boy who managed to defeat her, she looks down at his broken weapons and defeated form. She then addresses the unconscious boy by his gladiator alias, Little Gladiator, Liam. Suddenly, a voice from a magical orb interrupts her, chastising her for not crippling her opponent as their contract stipulated. The shadowy arena official on the other end gives her one last chance, ordering her to cut off the boy's arm as a trophy. With a menacing tone, he reminds her that the legendary dragon sword is on the line. His command is clear and ruthless: finish the job, right now. But the Black Bride quietly scoffs at the demand. Disgusted by the arena's vile politics, she sheathes her sword, deciding it's best to stay away from this place for a while. However, her thoughts are cut short as a mysterious and powerful aura begins to manifest nearby. A massive surge of blue energy erupts, taking her completely by surprise. Her eyes widen as she feels the immense power wash over her. Caught in the ethereal blue winds, she readies herself for whatever comes next. Stunned, she questions the source of this immense aura, wondering if she's hallucinating. Then, her eyes lock onto the source, the ghostly spirit of Liam Caravan floating beside the unconscious boy. The spirit chuckles, finding it unexpected that someone can perceive him, and he speculates that she can see him either because his descendant is unconscious or because their fierce battle somehow connected them. Confirming her senses are real, he formally addresses her as the young girl from the East. Just then, he recalls that in the East, rare individuals called shamans could sense spirits and wield divine power. Having an aptitude not only for martial arts but also for that is truly surprising. At this, she confirms to herself that this is no illusion. She is truly seeing a spirit. Moreover, she recognizes his aura as a realm of power that can only be reached by those who have truly mastered the sword. And it is the legendary pinnacle of swordsmanship known as the Mind Sword. This power is the undeniable symbol of a true swordmaster. After that, she recalls the legend of Carlos, who became a swordmaster by manifesting 10 swords. His power was so immense it left a permanent scar upon a city, cementing his title as the era's greatest swordsman. But the power she senses from this spirit is on an entirely different scale. She perceives not 10, but tens, hundreds, even thousands of mind swords swirling around him. The sheer number of spiritual blades fills the entire sky, a display of power far beyond any legend she has ever heard. Overwhelmed, she can only wonder what kind of divine entity is standing before her. The spirit tells the awestruck girl that while she isn't ready for answers yet, she has the potential to reach the ultimate destination. So he gestures towards a metaphysical realm, beckoning her towards the ultimate goal for all swordsmen, the land of the sword. As his spiritual form begins to fade, he bids her a temporary farewell, and before disappearing completely, he reveals he knows her true name, Seo Yun. Seo Yun is left stunned as his voice echoes in her mind, prompting a memory of her father. And she recalls her father telling her the legend of swordsmen who ascend to the land of immortals when their mastery reaches the heavens. He had promised her that in that paradise, they would be welcomed by their precious loved ones. And if someday their family could be together in that place, he would have no regrets. Now, standing in the arena, she sees her father's words not as a simple story, but as a tangible path forward. Her eyes widen as she realizes the legend was true all along, and she has just witnessed the power of a true god of swords. Sometime later, after the excitement of the match has died down, the arena stands quiet. Inside, a sign marks the recovery room. Seo Yun, now unmasked, enters the room where Arhan is resting. A bandaged and confused Arhan sits up, demanding to know what she means by her sudden proposition. She then reveals her real name, Seo Yun, and states her desire to follow him, to see, hear, and feel everything by his side, and explains that following him is the fastest path to her dream, reaching the pinnacle of the sword. Looking him directly in the eyes, she formally asks, "Will you allow it?" Arhan is completely bewildered, wondering if this is some kind of trick from the powerful warrior who nearly defeated him. Just then, Liam's spirit appears, telling his descendant not to be confused, as this is a natural course of events. The spirit explains that during the brief moment Arhan was unconscious, Seo Yun was able to sense his presence. With a dazzling, egocentric sparkle, he proudly declares that she was completely captivated by his greatness, and boasts to a dumbfounded Arhan that since ancient times, swordsmen have become his followers after just a glimpse of his shadow. However, his tone shifts to one of somber reflection. He admits that sometimes, when looking at his young descendant's path, he feels a deep sense of pity, because at an age meant for sharing love and experiencing life's joys, Arhan's reality is far different. Instead, the boy is forced to live a cruel life of struggle and death, burdened by a past stained with blood. His young descendant is tied to a dirty destiny, with no choice but to cling to vengeance. But Liam acknowledges that this is the path his descendant has chosen, and reminds him that to walk this path, he must cast aside all lingering attachments and regrets. Liam reaffirms his identity, not as a boy who trembles, but as a descendant of Caravan, Arhan the Avenger. With that, he tasks Arhan with judging for himself whether the swordswoman before him is a worthy ally. Arhan analyzes the offer. Seo Yun is a genius whose talent was recognized by Liam, and a highly skilled expert who holds goodwill toward him. and concludes that just as she will help him achieve his goals, she will serve as a powerful inspiration for him in return. Having made up his mind, he addresses her by her true name. He then introduces himself as Arhan and, instead of accepting her as a follower, shrewdly proposes a partnership, welcoming her as a neighbor. A slight, genuine smile appears on Seo-yun's face as he agrees to work with her. And with their new alliance forged, the scene transitions to outside the walls of the arena. Arhan and Seo-yun begin their journey back to the caravan territory, riding in a simple horse-drawn cart. During the ride, Arhan awkwardly decides to clear the air with her about their new arrangement. He prefaces his talk by asking her to listen without misunderstanding as he tries to address their new status as neighbors. He then vaguely explains that he has complicated, unspeakable circumstances, attempting to set some boundaries. Flustered, he finally blurts out his main point, that he cannot become her lover. An incredibly awkward silence descends upon the cart as his declaration hangs in the air, and he continues his clumsy explanation, rambling that while he knows she's not interested, the future is unpredictable for a young man and woman traveling together. Finishing his speech, he asks for her understanding in advance, just in case. Seo-yun calmly acknowledges his concern is reasonable but assures him he has nothing to worry about. She then delivers a devastating blow to his ego with 4 simple words, "You're not my type." As Arhan reels from the brutal rejection, Liam's spirit smirks in the background while Seo-yun confirms it will never happen. She elaborates on her preferences, tall, muscular, rugged men, and states that she absolutely hates scrawny, weak-looking guys. She even calls his impression too soft, noting that he seems like the type to apologize first in a fight, much to the coachman's visible discomfort. With a chillingly sweet smile, she asks if she needs to continue listing the reasons he doesn't meet her standards. A defeated Arhan insists that's more than enough, as Liam's spirit literally vanishes from second-hand embarrassment. Eager to change the subject, she quickly pivots to a new question for him. When she asks if there are other neighbors besides her, Arhan confirms that a knight moved in not too long ago, and cheerfully tells her that she should get along well with the knight. He describes their new neighbor as having not only great skill, but also a wonderful personality. The scene ironically cuts to this supposed kind person, Petal, standing over a field of slaughtered bandits. Eventually, Arhan and Seo-yun arrive on foot in the caravan territory. As they walk, he notes her remarkably light luggage, to which she simply replies that she doesn't carry much, and explains that a sword and a day's worth of food are all she needs, as she can procure anything else along the way. She then turns the question back on him, noticing that his own luggage has increased. She points out the new set of daggers he's carrying at his waist. At this, he explains that his blade was damaged in his last arena match, so he took the opportunity to buy some spares. He adds that his increased winnings from reaching the silver rank also allowed him to finally purchase some much-needed armor. He can't help but praise the excellent quality of metallurgy in Firma, the city of steel. As he sighs about the high cost, Liam's spirit appears to remind him that for a novice, good equipment is a crucial investment. Announcing their arrival, he gestures towards his home, the caravan mansion. Seo-yun is momentarily surprised to see that his residence is such a large, stately mansion. However, their arrival is immediately met with a shocking and bloody sight. They find Petal standing calmly in the courtyard, surrounded by the corpses of numerous slain intruders. He then nonchalantly apologizes for the messy state of the yard, explaining that some uninvited guests arrived. Wiping his mouth, Petal correctly deduces that Seo-yun must be the new neighbor Arhan mentioned. However, Arhan nervously tries to downplay the massacre, telling Patel to catch his breath after his coughing fit. Meanwhile, Seo-yun silently takes in the bloody scene, observing the aftermath of the battle. Her gaze falls upon one of the dead bandits, a clear sign of Petal's deadly efficiency. As Petal walks off, Arhan begins to panic over the terrible first impression he's made on his new neighbor. Seo-yun, however, seems completely unfazed, coolly remarking that, as she expected, this is no ordinary place. Once inside, Petal prepares to give them a summary of the recent events. He explains to Arhan and Seo-yun that quite a few uninvited guests have visited while Arhan was away, and clarifies that most of them were easily scared off, so things never escalated into a major fight. However, the situation changed about a week ago when more persistent intruders began probing their defenses. A new, more aggressive group started targeting the village, and at first, he simply tried to warn them off. Today, however, the intruders launched a full-scale, determined attack. Faced with their aggression, Petal explains that he inevitably had to shed some blood. From the information he gathered, he confirms that these were not ordinary bandits, and reveals the name of the organized group that attacked them, the Red Wolf Brotherhood. At this, Arhan correctly identifies their naming convention as one typically used by knighthood, which Petal confirms. Patel explains that such names are meant to embody a group's identity and meaning, a tradition they are merely co-opting. As a former knight himself, he finds the bandits' imitation of this noble tradition to be quite displeasing. He scoffs at the idea of lawless thugs daring to imitate a tradition of honor, revealing his own knightly pendant. He then tells them, which is why, even more so, you need to be careful of that group, prompting Arhan to ask, why is that? Just then, she chimes in and posits that using such a fearless name means one of two things. Either their group is exceptionally large, or realizing the second, more dangerous possibility. Their leader is so skilled and arrogant that he looks down on actual knights. Having listened to the entire debrief, Liam's spirit quietly appears behind Arhan. The spirit comments with a grin that this sounds like a perfect opportunity, and declares that the Red Wolf Brotherhood is nothing but a feast prepared specifically for his descendants' growth. With a fierce glint in his eyes, he commands Arhan to wipe out the arrogant bastards. Arhan sighs, having anticipated the catch. He must do it solely with his own strength, without any help from his new neighbors. However, he expresses his hesitation, pointing out the recklessness of facing a group that was bold enough to attack a swordwalker like Patel. Liam counters that a body of steel is forged only by being beaten, and there will be no better condition than this for digesting Fong's power. Then, the spirit makes a powerful guarantee to his descendant if he accomplishes the task alone. He promises that by succeeding, Arhan will finally be able to stop imitating others and forge his own unique path of the sword. With the new mission set, Arhan, Solyun, and Petal sit together in the mansion. Having accepted the difficult trial, he turns to Petal with a question. With grim determination burning in his eyes, he asks if Patel knows the location of the bandits' hideout. The scene transitions to the Verdi mountain range, located in the southern Iron Kingdom. Under the cover of night, a patrol from the Red Wolf Brotherhood makes its way through the misty forest. One of the bandits complains about their captain's eccentric taste, questioning why they would set up camp in such a backwater area. His companion simply chalks it up to their captain's odd personality, noting that this isn't the first time. However, they speculate that their captain might have been drawn in by local rumors of necromancers, a claim one of them scoffs at. Looking at the dilapidated ruins, the bandits agree it's just a crumbling, abandoned village with nothing left to loot. One of the men whines, wishing they could go back to the last village they plundered. His companion agrees, reminiscing fondly about their last stop. In a disturbing memory, they recall how their captain slaughtered all the men, leaving the women for them to have their fun with. The bandit fantasizes that if they had stayed, he would have had at least 10 wives for himself. Another bandit licks his lips, clearly aroused by the grotesque memories. Tired of the desolation, he voices his desperation to leave, claiming he's reaching his limit without the scent of a woman. His lecherous daydreaming is cut short as a hooded Arhan ambushes the group, spilling blood in the darkness. The sole survivor of the initial attack calls out to his companion, a newbie, wondering why he suddenly went silent. He turns around, only to see his comrades' mutilated corpses, and he is left in a state of utter shock and confusion at the carnage. His shock quickly turns to panicked rage as he screams out into the darkness. Which bastard dares to do that? Just then, a hand grabs his leg from behind in the shadow of night. He is shocked what happened to him. As he struggles to free himself, he can't believe how fast the attacker is and wonders if the rumors about necromancers are actually true. The hooded Arhan then appears before the terrified survivor, his sword ready to cut off the bandit's leg. Our protagonist coldly mocks the bandit's incompetence, pointing out how his torch and lack of awareness made him an easy target. With a splash of blood across his face, he judges the Red Wolf underlings to be nothing special. The bandit struggles to breathe as the blood leaves his body. He's completely at Arhan's mercy, writhing in agony on the ground. Arhan clamps a hand over the man's mouth, ordering him to swallow it. With chilling indifference, he silences the man, stating he has no desire to hear the screams of trash. In his final moments of terror, the bandit realizes his assailant isn't a monster, but just a kid. Arhan's glowing eyes fix on him as he delivers a brutal ultimatum: cooperate with his questions to keep his remaining ankle. Under the moonlight, he begins his interrogation of the last surviving bandit. The scene shifts to the past. Patel is stunned, asking Arhan to confirm that he just requested the location of the bandit's hideout. He then calmly elaborates, stating he also wants to know their combat styles and characteristics. A concerned Patel asks if he's truly planning to wipe out the entire Brotherhood by himself. Arhan's grim silence serves as confirmation of his deadly intent. At this, Patel slams his hands on the table, trying to snap the young man out of his foolish thoughts, and argues that defending the mansion is the smarter play, and that a proper knighthood will likely handle the bandits eventually. Nearby, Solyun observes the tense exchange in silence, offering no opinion. In the middle of his passionate plea, Patel is suddenly struck by a debilitating coughing fit. The violent sound echoes through the room, highlighting the severity of his illness. As Solyun helps him up, A winded Patel continues to beg Arhan not to be reckless, acknowledging how important the village is to him. Gasping for air, he warns that this isn't an average bandit group and that they surely have a few tricks up their sleeves. As he leaves, Seo-yun helps him to his room. Arhan apologizes to Petal, but his resolve remains unchanged. Pulling up his hood, he firmly states that he can't promise to stand down. Back in the present, the now-dead bandit lies in a pool of blood, his information having been extracted. Arhan stands over the body, his interrogation complete. Liam's spirit observes his descendants' ruthless efficiency, and he wryly comments that Arhan seems to have adapted well to the brutal laws of the Iron Kingdom. Just then, our guy spins his dagger and explains his actions to his ancestor, stating that he doesn't want to leave any loose ends. Yet, despite his ruthlessness, he shows a moment of doubt, asking Liam if this is truly the right way to proceed. He tells him that if the information he extracted is correct, then their captain is no ordinary bandit. Learning that the Red Wolf Brotherhood's captain is a deserting knight commonly known as a runaway dog. More importantly, he discovered that this deserting knight is also a formidable swordwalker. At this, he voices his concern to Liam, reminding him that he has already been defeated by swordwalkers twice before. Liam just grins, completely unfazed, and asks his descendant if those past defeats truly matter now. After that, Arhan readies himself to depart, his hesitation gone. Liam confidently states that it doesn't matter at all, as Arhan walks away from the carnage, determined to face the challenge head-on. Later, Petal rests, but the purple, corrupted mana of his illness is still visible spreading across his chest. Asleep on a couch, he's trapped in a dream of his past. The dream appears to be a troubling one, filled with memories he can't escape. He remembers being appointed as an escort knight for a young noblewoman who sweetly tells him that everyone said he was someone she could trust completely. So she looked up to him as the ideal knight, one who is absolutely loyal and would never betray his duty. A younger, armored Patel solemnly accepted his charge, vowing to stay by her side and protect her. In the present, Patel sweats in his sleep, haunted by the memory of being hailed as a chivalric hero. But the idyllic memory begins to blur and distort into a nightmare. Seo-yun urgently wakes him from his tormented sleep. As Petal groggily opens his eyes, she calmly informs him, "We have guests." When he remarks how troublesome the timing is, given his condition, but she tells him not to worry about it. She then bluntly states that his presence wouldn't change the outcome even if he were healthy, leaving Patel utterly shocked. Outside, the banner of the Yellow Elephant Knighthood flaps in the wind. A formidable squadron of knights on horseback has completely surrounded the caravan mansion. The armored knights sit ready, their formation tight and intimidating. From outside, their leader addresses Petal and Seo-yun, demanding they answer his questions. The knight in ornate armor announces his objective. He is looking for a runaway dog. The vice-captain of the Yellow Elephant Knighthood, Meekin, glares intently, making it clear that his target is Petal. Patel and Seo-yun are confronted by the entire Yellow Elephant Knighthood, who have completely surrounded the caravan mansion. After a long conversation, Petal tells Vice-Captain Meekin that this is all he knows about the Red Wolf. However, he then questions whether they truly traveled all this way just for a simple group of bandits. At this, Meekin confirms their mission is to hunt down a runaway dog of the Yellow Elephant, whose banditry has become infamous enough to reach the capital. And he scoffs at the bandits for daring to call themselves the Red Wolf, claiming the name has tarnished the knighthood's reputation. Turning a cold shoulder, the vice-captain tells Patel his information is utterly useless for their mission, because he complains that simply knowing the bandits are somewhere in the mountains is no help at all, as his knights will still have to do the hard work of finding them. Outmatched and unable to contribute, Patel can only offer a humble apology to the imposing man. Suddenly, Meekin's demeanor shifts as he recognizes Patel, recalling that the disgraced knight was once his senior at the academy. He feigns a moment of thought before condescendingly uttering his name, Petal. With a cruel grin, he remarks on how famous Petal used to be, even though he was nothing more than a swordwalker. And always an honorable, just paragon of knighthood who would execute any command of his lord without fail, the loyal Petal of the Green Deer. Meekin's taunts turn vicious as he sneers about how Petal was abandoned by his master after contracting an incurable disease. The vice-captain delivers the final insult, branding his former senior as nothing more than a sick dog. After that, he callously remarks that their little encounter will make for great gossip in the capital's taverns. Meekin then confronts Petal directly, accusingly asking why he's staring so intently. Sweating nervously, Petal quickly denies having any grievances. Meekin continues his psychological assault, asking if the disgraced knight is jealous of his wings, a clear metaphor for his own power and success. Looking down on him, he chides his former senior for dreaming of such things while standing at death's door. and cruelly speculates that if Petal had only managed to become a sword runner, he might have avoided this miserable fate. Surrounded by his knights, he tells Patel it's time to accept the fate he's been given. As a final, cutting remark, he advises him to give up his delusions before he becomes any uglier. Hearing this, Seo-yeon's patience finally wears thin, her hand twitching towards the hilt of her sword. But sensing her killing intent, Patel stops her, firmly telling her not to intervene, and demands that she acknowledge the reality of their situation. In the Iron Kingdom, might makes right. Just then, Meekin smirks at the exchange, calling her an excellent nurse and mocking that at least Patel won't be lonely before he dies. However, his cruel entertainment finished, he mounts his horse and announces his departure. He then rallies his troops, ordering the Yellow Elephant Knighthood to move out and hunt the runaway dog before sunrise. As the knighthood thunders away, Petal is left watching them disappear into the night. He looks at Meekin, silently pondering the power and status, the wings, that he has lost. Therefore, he remains still, lost in bitter reflection. Letting out a sigh of defeat, he laments his own pathetic state. Suddenly, a disturbing thought strikes him as he glances around. He turns to Seo-yeon, urgency in his voice as he asks where young Master Arhan is. Her silent, grim expression is all the confirmation he needs. The realization dawns on him, his face contorting in panic, as he connects the dots with horror, exclaiming that Arhan must have gone to the bandits' hideout all by himself. Meanwhile, at the Red Wolf Brotherhood's camp, the guards remark on their terrible luck. They complain about their boring patrol, completely unaware of the approaching threat. One of them yawns, noticing what he assumes is just the night patrol returning to camp. But as the lone figure approaches, the guard wonders aloud why he isn't carrying a torch. Out of the darkness, a coerced bandit walks silently toward them. His voice trembling with terror, the guide whimpers to his unseen captor that he has led him to the camp as ordered. However, his desperate plea for mercy is cut short by the swift and brutal sound of a killing blow. With his purpose served, the guide is silenced permanently, his body collapsing to the ground. The two guards can only look on in shock as a hooded Arhan emerges from the shadows. Before they can even cry out, he decapitates them both with a single, lightning-fast thrust of a blade. With the perimeter guards eliminated, his infiltration of the enemy camp begins. He then reflects that he now understands why his ancestor chose Fang, the blade of an assassin, for him. He knows its original owner was no match for heavily armored knights in a direct confrontation. Compared to veteran gladiators, the anonymous assassin could hardly be considered a strong warrior. In a fair, head-on fight, that assassin would lose 9 times out of 10. However, the assassin thrived not in matches, but in life-or-death struggles where the rules of engagement were completely different. His true strength lay in dirty tricks, like using poison to incapacitate foes while they slept. His strategy was to strike when their guard was down, exploiting any and all weaknesses. Embodying these methods, Arhan moves in to finish off a drugged and helpless bandit. Having cleared the outer camp, he makes his way to the main tent. He embraces the core tenet of a life-or-death battle. The one who stops the others breathing first is the one who survives. Adopting this mindset, he focuses on a single goal, a clean kill, never assuming success. He internalizes the assassin's philosophy, plan for failure to ensure a meticulous victory, so that he finds that these methods of constant suspicion and careful planning suit his own nature perfectly. On his way, a conscious bandit gloats about how much he's drunk, completely unaware of the danger. But in an instant, Arhan hurls his dagger, plunging it straight through the man's head. From the victim's perspective, he is a cold and efficient executioner standing over him. The bandit slumps over dead, and the ground is littered with his blood. Arhan takes a moment to survey the bloody scene he has created. Elsewhere in the camp, the leader of the Red Wolf Brotherhood rests, just as Arhan declares, "Now, I hunt the wolves." Suddenly, the leader's eyes snap open, his senses on high alert. His instincts prove correct, for he detects the distinct and terrifying smell of blood hanging in the air. The night is quiet at the Red Wolf Brotherhood's camp, but a silent massacre is already underway. Returning to his tent, a lone bandit is stunned by the horrific scene that greets him. He stumbles back in shock, discovering his comrades have been slaughtered in a river of blood. The guys he was just drinking with, why are they all dead? His horror grows as he realizes the carnage isn't confined to his tent. The entire camp has been silently purged. There are no signs of a struggle, meaning his brethren died without even knowing what hit them. Panic sets in as he understands they're facing an unbelievably skilled and stealthy killer. But just as he decides to flee, the imposing figure of his captain, Murphy, appears behind him, and nonchalantly asks why he is making such a fuss. Their captain is Murphy of the Red Wolf Brotherhood. His blood-red eyes narrow as he begins to survey the scene of the massacre. Standing amid the carnage, the overwhelming stench of blood pierces his nose, and mockingly commenting that someone has been having some fun. At the same time, Murphy's senses flare as he realizes some kind of rat has crawled into his camp. Unfazed by the slaughter, he grins, declaring they will be fun to bite to death. He channels his full power of blood senses to sense the assassin. At the same time, our guy channels the spirit of the assassin to calculate the skill path of his opponent. From a high vantage point, he calmly tallies 4, 5. With his 6th, he prepares to confront the leader. Liam's spirit quizzes him, asking for his assessment after observing Murphy's path. A confident Arhan confirms to his master that he has found his answer. With chilling certainty, he declares to him, "I can kill him." A path is the core power that turns a swordwalker into a superhuman. It grants them immense physical abilities by circulating energy throughout their body. By projecting their path outward, a walker can create a domain to detect enemies and amplify their own power. A path is therefore both a sensory organ and a powerful tactical weapon. Therefore, the level of a swordwalker is directly indicated by the perfection and complexity of their path. He then recalls his training. By observing an opponent's path, one can gauge their true level and skill. And he confidently tells Liam that compared to the powerful paths of Patel and Seoyun, Murphy's is pathetic. He remembers Petal's path, which was complex and solid like a massive, impenetrable wall. And he also recalls Seoyun's, which was elegant and surged like a powerful, raging wave. In contrast, Murphy's path has only 6 weak and unstable branches. He concludes that the man barely even qualifies as a swordwalker compared to the true masters he's faced. Liam's spirit smugly agrees, noting that it's only natural. The spirit reminds him that he has faced a once-in-a-century genius and a swordsman at the pinnacle of power. Chuckling, he praises his descendant, admitting it's a feat that Arhan even survived fighting such opponents. However, he cautions him that raw power isn't the only factor that determines victory in a fight to the death. Arhan, his eyes glowing with focus, reassures his ancestor not to worry. Vowing not to let his guard down, he descends to confront the bandit leader directly. Inside his tent, Murphy listens as his last 2 terrified men give their report. One nervously asks what their next move should be. The other trembles in fear, suggesting the rumors of necromancers in the area must be true, and they need to get out of here as soon as. Murphy furiously silences his subordinate, threatening to tear him in half for his cowardice. He then glares at his men, calling them incompetent bastards for their foolish assumptions. At this, they recoil, terrified by their captain's violent outburst. Their captain tells them to look closely at the bodies, pointing out that this is clearly not the work of black magic, and explains that every victim was killed with a single, precise stab to the vitals, a feat necromancers couldn't mimic. With chilling accuracy, he reveals his deduction: they are being hunted by a single, highly skilled assassin. He notes the assassin is skilled enough to hide from his path's senses. So, he orders his remaining men to gather everyone left and track the killer down immediately. With a menacing glare, he threatens to feed them all to the dogs if they fail. The terrified bandits hastily agree and promise to find the assassin. As they rush out into the night, Murphy is left alone with his thoughts. He ponders who could have hired such an expensive and skilled assassin to come after him. However, he considers his countless enemies, starting with the family of a woman he wronged in a previous village. Then he recalls a merchant group he slaughtered for fun, realizing he's made so many enemies that the list of suspects is endless. Laughing it off, he decides it doesn't matter who the client is, as this just means more entertainment for him. But as he plots to capture and torture the assassin, the corpse of one of his men is unceremoniously tossed into his tent. The dead eyes of his subordinates stare up at him from the blood-soaked ground. Murphy is shocked that the assassin has brought the fight directly to him. His eyes widen as he senses the imminent danger approaching from the darkness. Just then, he grips his sword tightly and rushes out of the camp. Looking toward the corpses, Murphy realizes the 2 men he sent to hunt the assassin are now dead. He's stunned by the killer's speed, wondering when he could have possibly struck. Looking around, he realizes he's been completely enveloped in pitch-black darkness. Even the assassin has systematically put out every fire in the camp, creating the perfect killing ground. Enraged and blinded, Murphy roars into the darkness, calling out the little rat. In the darkness, a faint glowing blue eye of his opponent appears from behind, staring at him. His eye then glows a menacing red, a sign that he senses his opponent. He lashes out blindly with a furious strike, aiming for where he senses him. But Arhan easily evades the wild swing, leaving the attack to hit nothing but air. He moves in a blur of motion. Before the captain can react, a blade slices across his shoulder, drawing first blood. Droplets of blood fly as he is struck. Our guy realizes with a start that if he had been a fraction of a second slower, his head would be gone, and he declares that they look as if they are one with the darkness itself. Arhan's blood-stained blade glows with a sinister purple aura as he introduces himself. I am an assassin of crowd. And the assassin's creed echoes in the darkness. A wanderer who walks through the night towards the light of freedom, fully embracing his role, he declares that the darkness of the world is his ally. Under the light of a full moon, two figures move swiftly through the wilderness. Following close behind Arhan, Petal and Selyun race through the night, but Petal is clearly beginning to feel the strain. He pants heavily, his worry for the young man growing with every step, and urges his companion to hurry, explaining that if the bandits are deserter knights, the situation is far more dangerous than they first thought. He fears that the Red Wolf leader is an enemy Arhan absolutely cannot handle on his own. In his eyes, despite Arhan's dazzling talent, he's still a mere seedling who needs more time before facing a fully fledged swordwalker. While he worries, Selyun listens to his frantic concerns with a calm, almost dismissive expression, and states that she doesn't think so. With unwavering confidence, she corrects him, stating that the boy is no mere seedling. Instead, she declares that his talent has already begun to bloom, her faith in him absolute. Meanwhile, the bandit leader, Murphy, confronts a cloaked Arhan, cynically judging him to be a rather expensive assassin, and demands to know who hired this mysterious figure to come after him. He then cycles through a list of potential clients, from a merchant group he robbed to women he's wronged. When Arhan remains silent, he wonders aloud if the rival Yellow Elephant Knighthood sent him, demanding an answer. But deciding it no longer matters, he just grins, figuring a good fight will at least be entertaining. However, his eyes widen in shock. As Arhan appears from the darkness, Murphy stares down his surprisingly young opponent. Then, the bandit leader begins to laugh, finding the whole situation utterly ridiculous. That the one who wiped out his entire brotherhood was just a kid, a greenhorn still wet behind the ears. Clutching his face in disbelief, he calls the situation truly absurd. His disbelief quickly turns to rage, and he abandons all pretense of a game, shouting, "Change of plans, you little shit." He lunges forward, assuming the boy has just been using simple tricks to evade his men. Unleashing his ferocious red aura, he declares that now that Arhan has finally shown himself, the fight is over. With a furious roar, he vows to rip the young assassin to pieces. He swings his massive sword with all his might, screaming for his opponent to just die. But in that moment, Arhan fully utilizes the assassin's skills, becoming one with the knight. He then coolly declares that the darkness is his ally, while effortlessly sidestepping the furious attack. Murphy is stunned, unable to comprehend how he could have missed when he never took his eyes off his target. Before he can even process it, he feels a sharp sting as blood splatters from a fresh wound. Arhan has already moved past him, leaving a series of deep, bleeding gashes in his wake. The bandit leader grunts in pain, shocked by the speed and precision of the counterattack. Just then, he swings wildly again, calling the boy a rat, but his blade only cuts through empty air. Baffled, he thinks this is impossible. His path as a swordwalker should have been overwhelming. Then, he realizes with dawning horror that Arhan isn't using a path to counter him. He's literally disappearing from his senses. He struggles to understand how his foe pierces his defenses and slips through the gaps, as if tearing an opening in reality itself, a realization that comes just as Arhan lands another clean strike. Channeling the crowd freedom fighter's memories, Arhan recalls the assassin's core philosophy: he was never the stronger combatant. Therefore, to face countless superior foes, a different strategy was always needed. He had to borrow the power of his greatest ally, the darkness itself. The prerequisite for this assassination art was to first flaunt one's presence. Every breath, the rustle of clothes, and each footstep were intentionally exaggerated. The assassin would amplify every trace of his existence, forcing the enemy to fixate all their attention on him. Then, at the precise moment the enemy's senses were completely locked onto his presence, he would erase it all, vanishing completely. This sudden, extreme contrast in cognition overwhelms the target, causing a total confusion of their five senses, and in that fleeting moment of sensory chaos, the opening for a fatal blow is created. In the past, guards would fall without ever understanding what hit them. Through this lethal manipulation of perception, the assassin becomes a living embodiment of the darkness. Back in the present, Arhan perfectly executes this very technique, landing another decisive blow on the bewildered Murphy. However, as he looks at his bloody dagger, a sense of unease creeps in. Something feels wrong. He questions why the battle is so one-sided, even against a fledgling swordwalker. Thanks to the assassin's ingrained instincts, a gut feeling tells him there's more to this fight than meets the eye. Suspecting his opponent is hiding a trump card, he decides to end it immediately. He goes for the killing blow, aiming to sever his opponent's windpipe before any trick can be revealed. With lethal focus, he lunges for the final strike. But in a shocking turn of events, his dagger is stopped cold just inches from the bandit's throat. With the display of inhuman strength, Murphy has caught the blade between his teeth. His eyes glowing with a monstrous light, Arhan identifies his opponent not as a human, but as a fellow beast. The yellow elephant knighthood rides through a misty forest on their mission. As they ride, one of the knights questions his vice captain, Meekin, about the scale of their operation. He asks if they truly need so much manpower just to hunt down a mere runaway dog, and argues that even if their target has formed a large bandit group, their military strength still seems like a massive overreaction. Meekin simply confirms that the higher-ups deemed this level of force necessary, much to the knight's confusion. With a grim smile, he explains that the reason for their caution is quite simple, and reveals that the knighthood has already secretly dispatched 6 knights to deal with their target. However, their target, a man named Murphy, single-handedly defeated and killed all 6 of them. The knight is shocked to learn of their crushing defeat, while Meekin explains that Murphy is far from just a washed-up deserter. He then warns that when it comes to the act of killing, Murphy is an exceptional and terrifying beast. He reveals that when Murphy was a knight, he had a particularly fearsome alias. He was known throughout the land as the Unstoppable Berserker. Back in the present, our guy is stunned that Berserker is caught an assassin's specialized strike with his bare teeth. And he questions himself, what kind of monstrous biting strength is this? With a furious crunch, Murphy shatters the assassin's steel dagger with his bare teeth. Arhan watches, stunned, as Murphy's power begins to surge. The man lets out a monstrous roar as he fully transforms, unleashing his berserker rage, and surging forward to attack. However, Arhan sidesteps and manages to dodge it. The ground beneath them cracks and shatters from the immense pressure of his newfound power. Struggling against the shockwave, Arhan realizes his opponent's power and speed have changed completely. He knows that if he hadn't instinctively dodged that first explosive outburst, he would have been split in two. Fueled by pure rage, the berserker winds up for a devastating punch. Arhan grits his teeth, bracing himself for the impossibly fast and powerful blow. He uses his sword to block it. Blood flies as his sword pierces the berserker's hand. An overhead view shows the sheer, overwhelming power of the berserker's strength. Arhan's eyes widen in shock as his sword shatters into pieces. However, he manages to dodge it by using the speed of an assassin. He leaps back, unable to resist the monstrous strength. A moment of stillness falls over the ravaged clearing. Arhan struggles to catch his breath, analyzing the dire situation. He can't believe the transformation, noting how ferocious his opponent's fighting style and aura were even before this. Now, however, Murphy has transcended his limits, a bloodthirsty grin plastered on his face. Arhan concludes that his opponent is no longer a man, but a terrifying, bloodthirsty beast. As his opponent's physical abilities and his path become more ominous, Liam's spirit appears to offer guidance. Liam explains that mutants like Murphy, who lose themselves to their power, occasionally appear. He then elaborates that a berserk state is the result of a warrior who lacks conviction and is driven solely by murderous intent. They trade their reasoning for immense power, and Liam warns Arhan that to win, he must fully digest the assassin's memories and complete his own path. Taking a deep breath, Arhan prepares himself for the grueling battle ahead. He drops his daggers, accepting that this fight is a necessary trial for his growth. Liam explains that there's only one way to truly temper immature iron, and that is to force it to clash directly with a worthy opponent. Arhan meets the berserker's charge head-on, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. With glowing red eyes, Murphy glares down at him, intent on crushing him. However, Arhan uses his superior agility to dodge the wild, powerful swings. The berserker launches another attack, forcing him back. Sparks fly as Arhan barely holds his ground against the overwhelming strength. Realizing a direct confrontation is futile, he devises a new strategy, to focus on dodging and parrying. He reasons that if he is unable to break his opponent's bones, then he will simply carve away all of his flesh first. His blade glows as he begins the new assault. He ducks and weaves around the berserker's attacks with practiced ease. Like a phantom, he dances around the raging beast, looking for an opening. He lands a flurry of shallow but precise cuts across the berserker's back, and relentlessly chips away at his opponent, drawing more blood with each pass. Enraged by the constant, stinging attacks, Murphy's fury intensifies. However, he notices that his opponent has disappeared from his sight. His eyes widen as he senses a sudden attack. Just then, Argyll leaps for the fatal blow and recalls the assassin's core tenet: no matter how thick the hide, there is always a weak spot. With deadly precision, he targets the one place he knows will be vulnerable, his opponent's eye. As he swings his sword, to his shock, the berserker masterfully dodges his swing, creating an opening for a counterattack. Arhan's eyes widen, realizing too late that he has been caught in the berserker's trap. The berserker's fist slams into him, a crushing, deadly blow, and Arhan coughs up blood from the devastating blow. The sheer force of the blow hurls him backward through the air. He collapses to the ground, clutching his chest in agony. Panting for breath, he realizes with horror that a single punch nearly knocked him unconscious. However, his gambit paid off as Murphy stumbles back, clutching his now bleeding eye, and he vows to return the favor. Just then, the wounded beast lets out a final, terrifying roar, ready to end the fight. After taking a brutal hit from Murphy, Arhan's last sword falls from his grasp. Meanwhile, Murphy clutches his wounded eye, roaring in pain and fury as his berserker rage intensifies. Now completely consumed by his battle lust, he prepares to finish the fight against a cornered Arhan. Arhan quickly assesses that while blinding him was a good tactic, the berserker's aura has only grown more ferocious in response. And he knows he is outmatched, realizing that his opponent's raw strength means a single clean hit would be fatal. The sight of his cracked and failing sword only confirms his dire situation as his options rapidly dwindle. Every instinct screams for him to retreat and survive, to live and fight another day. However, it is this very life-or-death crisis that forces him to push beyond his limits. Murphy unleashes a devastating punch, the sheer force of which sends Arhan flying backward. Yet, even on the brink of defeat, Arhan's eyes blaze with blue energy as he resolves that he must stand and fight. This life-threatening moment unlocks the final memories of the Sword Fang, transporting his mind to the free city of Crowd. He relives the memories of the Crowd freedom fighter who recalled that to reclaim freedom, someone had to spill blood, a role he willingly accepted. The freedom fighter remembers honing his deadly skills in the Firma arena through countless life-or-death struggles. Ultimately captured, he hangs bleeding, having spilled plenty of blood and crossed every line to reach this very end. Facing his own execution, he sees no opening for escape and no darkness in which to hide, so he accepts his fate. He is led to the guillotine before a crowd and a line of enforcers, believing there is nothing more he can do. A cruel executioner calls for the crowd's attention, ready to make an example of the captured rebel, and gleefully declares this to be the wretched end for a murderer who dared to slay faithful enforcers and innocent nobles. Then, he commands the citizens to witness this miserable end as a warning against disrupting the established order. After that, he orders them not to resist, but to bow their heads and submit, telling them it is the only comfort they are allowed. With a sinister grin, he reinforces the idea that submission is their only choice. The oppressed citizens of Crowd look on, their faces etched with fear and hopeless resignation. But just then, a guard moves, and cuts the rope that binds him to the horse. In that moment, he realizes there is nothing more he can do. However, when he suddenly becomes free, he shatters the illusion of his captor's control. He flips to his feet, stunning the guards and the onlooking crowd alike. With furious determination, he refuses to let his story end so powerlessly, and in a shocking act of ultimate defiance, he sinks his teeth into the guard. Through a pained cry, he declares that he does not fear dying like trash and is willing to be trampled to dust in battle. The executioner and the crowd are utterly shocked by this brutal and unexpected act of rebellion. Standing over a fallen guard, the freedom fighter vows that he must become the darkness that resists to the bitter end. With the guard's half-torn ear in his mouth, he proclaims his goal, to become the darkest darkness in order to illuminate the light of freedom. Then, facing the executioner, he addresses the citizens in the crowd, telling them not to bow their heads. He unleashes a defiant roar, urging them to show the world that they, too, have the will to fight. His powerful words pierce the fog of fear, igniting a spark of hope in the eyes of the people. He rallies them, shouting for them to fight back when their rights are stripped away, and urges them to resist when they are being trampled. Just then, the guards move forward to attack. He dodges that attack and severs one of them. He then screams the painful truth, that Crowd no longer lives up to its name as a free city. His declaration resonates deeply with the citizens, for they all know he speaks the truth. However, he continues his fight. His final commands echo through the square: do not look away, do not submit. And though he takes a fatal wound, his resistance continues to inspire those watching. He shouts that even if they are lost in a thick fog where they cannot see an inch ahead, they must keep moving forward, and he fights on until his last breath. As chaos erupts, the executioner falls from his panicked horse. The citizens, once frozen in fear, now look on with shock and newfound resolve. Spurred by the hero's sacrifice, one man clenches his fists, ready to act. And across the square, the collective fear of the people transforms into righteous anger. Terrified, the executioner realizes he has lost all control. The dying freedom fighter stands over the cowering executioner, his mission almost complete. In his final moments, he looks out at the people he has awakened, and dies with a single purpose on his mind: freedom. Instead of letting him fall, the citizens he inspired rush forward to catch his body. One young man's face twists with determination. A torch has been passed. The crowd unites, their voices rising in a single powerful chant, "For freedom." Fists are raised in unison, signaling the start of the people's rebellion. The oppressed citizens finally fight back, attacking the enforcers who have tormented them for so long. Even the terrified executioner cannot escape the sound of the people chanting for their freedom. The rebellion explodes as the people in the crowd gather to tear the executioner apart. The freedom fighter smiles, content that his sacrifice has shown the true spirit of his city. A vision of a bright and liberated crowd fills his dying mind, a symbol of the future he fought for. Back in the present, Murphy is ready for the final, fatal attack on him. Arhan, now empowered by the darkest darkness of crowd, prepares to unleash its full might. He accepts the freedom fighter's legacy, vowing to carry on his indomitable will. A massive wave of brilliant blue energy erupts from him as he swings his sword, and blood splatters in the air. Murphy is completely stunned, unable to comprehend what just happened. In an instant he feels his own power, his path being completely shattered by Arhan's newfound strength. Just then, his head falls from his shoulders, a testament to Arhan's new power, and Arhan realizes that the sword fang has been completely digested. In the aftermath of the brutal battle, Arhan stands victorious over the fallen bandit leader, Murphy. Murphy gasps his last breath, defeated. Exhausted, Arhan lets out a sigh of relief, having survived the grueling ordeal. Suddenly, a surge of power emanates from his sword as he feels a profound change within himself. In this moment of victory, the memories imbued in the assassin's sword, Fang, are finally and completely digested. Just then, our guy recalls the moment Murphy was attacking him, and he declares that he saw it had been so faint that the straight blue line seemed within reach, yet always slipped away. However, he instinctively knew this is his path. As Arhan surveys the scene, the spirit of his ancestor Liam appears beside him. Liam proudly informs his descendant that, though still inexperienced, he can now unfold a path by his own will, officially stepping into the entry level of a swordwalker. With a smug grin, he adds that this new entry-level power is incomparable to the beast Arhan just struck down. He then explains that the caravan's path is one of steel, extending straight and true without bending before any obstacle. Theirs is the path of steel, a power that shatters all that stands in its way. He reveals that in the past, those captivated by its majesty had a special name for this power. With an intense gaze, he christens his descendants' newly awakened ability, the Line. However, the strain of awakening his new power is too much, and Arhan begins to falter. He collapses face first into the dirt, completely spent from the battle, and weakly asks his master why he has no strength left, while Liam explains it's the backlash of using excessive power in an untrained body. The ancestor cackles maniacally, gleefully telling him to look forward to the intense training that awaits him to become a mature walker. Lying in the mud, Arhan reflects that while he's still at the entry level, he has finally taken a genuine step forward. He clenches a fistful of dirt, proud that he has forged a path that is completely his own, not a half-baked imitation. A torch illuminates the darkness as a familiar voice calls out, "Young Master Arhan." Lying on the ground, he looks up to see his companions have arrived. It's Patel and Solyan, who have tracked him to the bandit camp. Completely surprised, a battered Arhan asks how they found him. After helping him up, his companions watch as he recovers. He takes a moment to wipe the grime from his face. He thanks Solyan for the cloth, and she wordlessly crumples it in her hand, disgusted by the filth. Surveying the carnage, Petal asks in disbelief if Arhan truly wiped out the entire bandit group by himself. The sheer number of dead bandits strewn across the camp is a testament to his overwhelming victory. However, he sheepishly tries to downplay his incredible feat, claiming, "Luck was just on my side," earning jealousy from Solyan. Patel listens silently, his expression unreadable as he processes the scene. "Luck, you say," he repeats, not quite believing the young master's humble explanation. Petal reflects that while he knew Arhan had a special talent, he never expected this, and recalls a swordsman who was still lacking in many areas, making this growth truly shocking. Even he had assumed it would take a great deal of time and experience for the boy's talent to fully bloom. He marvels that a beginner was victorious against a runaway knight, a feat he thought only possible for members of the 5 great families. Suddenly, a sound from the trees puts everyone on high alert. Patel tells Arhan that perhaps he was simply lucky, like a protagonist in a story. With a knowing smile, he muses that being a protagonist isn't something just anyone can become. Arhan is confused, but Petal reveals that he finally understands why he ended up in this desolate land. Evading the question, Patel urges them to leave, warning that it could be dangerous to delay any longer, and explains the danger isn't from the dead bandits, but from the knighthood Murphy belonged to, who are roaming nearby to execute their runaway dog. Confused, Arhan argues that the knighthood should be thanking them for sparing them the trouble. Seo-yun scoffs at his naivete, explaining that knights are enraged when robbed of the retribution they were meant to dish out, and concludes that knighthoods are gatherings bound by meaningless honor, prompting Arhan to question such twisted logic. Liam's spirit appears, reminding his descendant that he'd warned him, knights are nothing more than troublesome swordsmen. With a sharp glint in his eye, he realizes the moment has come for Arhan to experience firsthand just how troublesome knights can be. Just then, a sudden tremor and the sound of approaching hoofbeats alerts the group to a new threat. The Yellow Elephant Knighthood arrives in force, surrounding the camp. Vice Captain Meekin surveys the dead bandits, his eyes locking onto Murphy's body as he demands to know who was responsible. Enraged, he bellows, asking who dared to touch their runaway dog and sully the honor of the Yellow Elephant. He then screams at the group, demanding to know which one of them did this. Meekin glares at Patel, sneering, "Oh, sick dear," and warns that there is no mercy in the march of an angry elephant. He stamps his foot, cracking the ground, and commands Patel to answer if he doesn't wish to be trampled. Arhan grits his teeth, barely able to withstand the crushing pressure of Meekin's powerful aura, and realizes this man's power surpasses even that of Patel and Seo-yun, marking him as an impossibly strong figure. Worried that everyone will end up in trouble because of him, he resolves to handle the situation himself. But before he can speak, Patel steps forward and calmly declares, "I killed him." Arhan looks at Patel in shock, stunned by his bold and dangerous lie. Meekin coolly asks Patel to repeat himself, clearly not expecting such a confession. At this, Patel recounts his own history as a former knight of the Green Deer Knighthood, known as Patel the Loyal. With unwavering resolve, he looks Meekin in the eye and repeats, "I said that I killed the runaway dog." A panicked Arhan screams at Patel, questioning what on earth he's doing. As he lunges forward to correct the lie, but Seo-yun holds him back. She silently shakes her head, preventing Arhan from interfering in Patel's decision. From atop his horse, Meekin acknowledges that the sick deer was aware of their situation, and reminds him that as someone who has taken a knight's oath, he must understand the meaning of his actions. After that, he declares that Patel, a washed-up relic, has dared to openly tarnish the honor of their knighthood. A cruel smile spreads across Meekin's face as he relishes the confrontation. He addresses Patel by his former title, Knight Patel the Loyal, and states that as vice captain, he cannot overlook this behavior. With a surge of golden energy, he formally challenges Patel to an honor duel. Patel's eyes glow with a cool blue light as he gazes up at the knight and resolutely says, "I accept." An honor duel is a fight where combatants wager everything to condemn those who have tarnished their honor and discipline. The winner regains their honor and raises their prestige as a knight. The loser, however, loses everything, as their corpse is publicly displayed in the plaza. For knights who value honor above life, this public humiliation is a punishment far worse than death. Because of the high stakes, an honor duel is never a decision made lightly. Meekin rides away, having forced the duel. Such a match is especially rare between knights with a significant gap in skill. In fact, it is almost unheard of for such a lopsided duel to be arranged. Yet Patel stands silently as the knights depart, resolute in his decision. A furious Arhan immediately confronts him, demanding to know why he accepted the suicidal duel. He points out that Meekin is a sword runner, a tier of power far beyond a swordwalker, wielding the symbol of their rank, wings, and reminds Patel that even if rank isn't everything, he is still only a swordwalker. He stresses that Patel's body is so ravaged by illness that he can barely even move properly. "So how do you plan on fighting a sword runner?" Arhan yells, completely bewildered by his decision. He clenches his jaw, his anger boiling over as he recalls their first meeting. He then reminds Patel of his initial wish to spend his final moments quietly, a choice completely at odds with this. After that, he says that by accepting the duel, he is wagering not just his life, but his very honor as well, and desperately begs Patel to withdraw, even offering to take the blame for killing Murphy and the bandits himself. Patel turns and calmly thanks the young master for caring so much about him. He explains that for a knight, there is sometimes something more important than victory or honor. He confesses his dream, to be like the protagonist of a knight novel, standing tall before a powerful enemy. Clenching his fist, he declares his desire to be a man who protects his neighbors. With a gentle smile, he says that perhaps God took pity on him in his final moments and granted him this one opportunity. Looking at the conflicted Arhan, he asks, "Please, will you allow me to achieve my dream?" Defeated, Arhan can only whisper that he will regret this. Patel watches Arhan walk away before turning to leave himself, heading off to prepare for his final battle. With a final, sorrowful apology, he walks into the woods to prepare for his fate. Meanwhile, at the camp of the Yellow Elephant Knighthood, a junior knight approaches the vice captain, Meekin, inside his tent. and asks, "Did you really have to go that far?" The knight, Senior Knight Ron, confirms that he is talking about the honor duel scheduled in a week. When Mekan asks why, Ron honestly replies that he finds his commander's actions excessive. Ron points out that Patel's body is already consumed by disease and that he likely won't even last a fortnight, and also states that in a week, Patel will be a walking corpse, struggling just to move. He argues that cornering such a man into a duel will only earn them the stigma of oppressing the weak. Mekan coldly considers this for a moment before conceding, perhaps. He then turns to Ron and asks how much he knows about the man called Patel the Loyal. Mekan's eye glows with intensity as he states that he knows the knight very well. He recalls their academy days, when everyone mocked Patel as a talentless idiot who would never be more than a sword beginner. They called him a fool who only knew how to try hard, predicting he'd die soon after becoming a knight. Yet, against all odds, the man reached the pinnacle of a swordwalker and has managed to survive until now. Mekan recounts his legendary feats, including emerging victorious in 17 honor duels for his lord. He protected his lord on the battlefield even under a rain of bombardment, and when 500 starving refugees swarmed the castle, he defended the gates alone. He concludes that the moniker Patel the Loyal is a truly fitting one. However, Mekan sees his firm convictions not as noble, but as dangerous. A fiery aura begins to build around Mekan as he reveals his true, sinister intentions. He declares Patel's convictions are just as dangerous as his own powerful wings. He even plans to tie Patel's corpse to a wagon and parade it through the village where he lived. And he will announce Patel's death and trample on his corpse to completely extinguish whatever honor he has left. Mekan believes that if he tramples and violates this man of steel, he will reach a new state of power, and he is certain it will grant him the power to spread his second pair of wings, achieving an even higher rank. He then menacingly asks Ron if he still thinks there's nothing to gain from this duel. Back at the caravan mansion, the mood is somber. Arhan sits alone, racked with guilt and a sense of helplessness over the situation. The spirit of his ancestor Liam appears, stating the cold, hard fact, Patel will die. He dismisses Patel's experience, explaining that in a duel between a swordwalker and a swordrunner, skill means nothing. Arhan grits his teeth, knowing Patel has absolutely no chance of victory. However, Liam questions why he has grown so attached to a man he once only saw as the source for a new sword. Arhan grimaces, admitting that Patel reminds him of his father. He remembers his own father, who also chose to fight an unbeatable enemy and defended his home to the very end. Our protagonist confesses his deep-seated hatred for arrogant, powerful people who trample the weak as if it's their right. But what's even more agonizing is his own weakness, which leaves him with no choice but to watch. Liam challenges him, asking if he is willing to stand by, even if it means losing the chance to obtain a swordwalker's sword. "I don't care about that," Arhan explodes. "What truly matters is something else entirely." He questions the meaning of protecting himself if it means turning a blind eye to injustice, and screams that any revenge gained through such a cowardly choice would be meaningless. Calming down, he confesses that he hates himself for being so buried in revenge that he once thought of easily taking Patel's sword. He laments his foolishness, for he failed to see what he truly needed to protect. Liam's hand rests on his descendant's shoulder, approving of this new mindset. With a grin, he tells him that a sword is just a blade, and a caravan can't let himself be consumed by such things. "Let me tell you, young descendant," Liam says, a new resolve in his eyes, "the only path to protecting everyone." He declares that Arhan must fight in Patel's place as a champion in the honor duel. In a forest clearing, Patel endures a grueling training session, pushing his ailing body to its absolute limit. Despite his terminal illness, he swings his greatsword with unwavering determination. Sweat pours down his face, his intense gaze revealing a man steeling himself for his final battle. Having observed his reckless training, Arhan finally calls out to him, and he asks for a moment of Patel's time. He earnestly tells him that he has something important to say, but the knight cautiously keeps his distance. Patel apologizes, explaining that for now, he cannot put down his sword. Resolved to change his mind, Arhan begins to reveal his greatest secret. He explains his unbelievable ability. By eating a sword, he can absorb the skills and memories of its previous owner. And with this power, he concludes, he can make those memories and skills his own. Our protagonist explains that his ability to wield so many different weapons is all thanks to this borrowed power. He reminds Patel that this is how he, a mere beginner, was able to stand against a master like him, even for a moment. He then admits that his surprising victory over Murphy was only possible by relying on the power of another consumed sword. Stunned, Patel has to admit that while it's the most absurd story he's ever heard, he doesn't believe it's a lie. After all, he's been a first-hand witness to the young man's miraculous growth. Then, with a sharp glint in his eye, Patel correctly deduces the real reason for this confession. He asks if Arhan's intention is to eat his sword and become his champion in the upcoming duel. Back in the mansion, Arhan recalls asking his ancestor Liam to explain the concept of a champion. Liam explains that a champion is a warrior who fights on behalf of another, carrying their honor into battle. However, he warns that a champion must also be prepared to bear the heavy price of defeat, and emphasizes that becoming a champion is a grave undertaking requiring truly solemn resolve. Analyzing the upcoming duel, Liam notes that while Patel's level is lower than Mechan's, his flawless fundamentals are not to be underestimated. He believes that Patel's solid foundation is the only way to break the wings of a powerful sword runner like Mechan. Liam sees Patel's sword as the key, calling it the only miracle they can hope for. Though a slim chance, he agrees it is a better gamble than letting a sick man fight alone. And so, Liam leaves the final choice to Arhan, asking what his young descendant will do. Back in the present, with renewed determination, Arhan declares that he will fight as Patel's champion. He vows to inherit the sword that holds Patel's very life and win the duel so that no one has to bleed. Desperate to save his friend, he begs Patel to entrust him with that sword. Patel lets out a heavy sigh, touched by the young man's passionate, kind-hearted plea. He acknowledges Arhan's kindness, but it seems he has a different plan in mind. Instead of answering directly, he asks Arhan to watch him for a moment before he makes his final decision. To everyone's surprise, Patel then turns to Seoyun and prepares to face her in a spar. Arhan watches in confusion, wondering what his terminally ill friend could possibly be planning in protests, calling it senseless for Patel to spar in his grave condition. But Seoyun, understanding his intent, coldly tells the little gladiator not to interfere. Patel simply states that his resolve can't be stopped, thanking Seoyun for accepting his unreasonable request. She warns him, however, that she cannot hold back now that her sword is drawn. Then she asks if he is absolutely sure he won't regret it. He thanks her for the concern, but cryptically tells her not to worry. As they take their stances, he says that's exactly what he's hoping for. Worried, Arhan thinks the spar is too reckless and considers stepping in to stop them. But Liam's spirit holds him back, telling him to watch closely, as this will be a great lesson for them both, and explains that the sublime light emitted by a man burning away his life at death's door is a sight to behold. Meanwhile, Seoyun plans to end the fight quickly, believing it's the least she can do for the ailing knight. But when she attacks, Patel unleashes a shocking burst of power, completely shattering her expectations. Both she and Arhan are left speechless by the sheer force emanating from the supposedly weak man. Seoyun struggles to block his attack, her sword vibrating from the immense power. She's shocked by the unexpected weight behind his sword, a force far beyond a sick man's capabilities, and can't comprehend how a man for whom even breathing should be a struggle can possess such overwhelming power. With glowing eyes, he pushes back, demonstrating an impossible level of strength. A single, overwhelming strike then sends her flying backwards. At this, she grits her teeth, furious with herself for being complacent and underestimating him. Now she understands, his illness is completely irrelevant. This is his true, terrifying skill. The two clash in a beautiful and deadly flurry of blows, lighting up the clearing. Patel's flawless technique and overwhelming power press Seoyun onto the defensive. But then, suddenly, she spots an opening, and strikes with blinding speed, exploiting the momentary weakness. However, she is shocked that his powerful attack is blocked. Patel's eyes are glowing with immense power, and the force of his final attack shatters her sword. She can only stare up in wide-eyed shock, utterly defeated. Arhan watches in stunned silence, unable to believe that Sir Patel just defeated the powerful Seoyun. Patel stands victorious over his kneeling opponent, his point proven, his demonstration complete. He politely thanks her for the spar. Gazing at the sky, a revitalized Patel admits that the spar made him feel more alive than ever. He then finally turns to Arhan, acknowledging his kind proposal and expressing his gratitude, and concedes that Arhan's plan might prolong his life, but reveals that he is not fighting merely to win. He declares that this duel against Mechan is the answer to a question he's held his entire life, and he solemnly explains to a heartbroken Arhan that this final fight is the very proof of his existence. The fated day of the honor duel between Patel and Mechan has arrived. Mechan and the Yellow Elephant Knighthood stand ready, waiting for their opponent to appear. His eyes narrow as he spots a figure approaching through the mist. He sneers, "So you didn't run away, Patel the Loyal." But as the figure emerges, Mechan is surprised to see a man with a much healthier complexion, and wonders if Patel found some last-minute enlightenment. Regardless, he smirks, thinking this turn of events will make the duel all the more meaningful. However, as the man draws closer, Mechan realizes it's not Patel at all. It's Arhan, now exuding an entirely new, powerful aura. Mechan is stunned, realizing he mistook the kid who was hiding behind Patel for the knight himself. However, he can't believe it's the same weakling he saw before, and notes that it's not just the boy's atmosphere and aura, his physique has become as sturdy as Patel's was in his youth. He is utterly baffled, wondering how such a change is even possible. Dismissing it as some kind of trick, he decides the how isn't important. He then coldly confronts Arhan, demanding, "Where is Petal?" With a heavy heart, Arhan informs him that Sir Petal will not be coming. Mekin scoffs, refusing to believe that stubborn fools would ever run from a duel. Then, a sinister realization dawns on him. He grins maliciously, asking if Petal finally succumbed to his illness and died. A flashback begins, recounting the events of a few days prior. He recalls the immense power Petal displayed when he overpowered Seoyun in their spar. Seeing his firm smile, he had felt a flicker of hope that Sir Petal could overcome both his disease and the Sword Runner. For a moment, it truly seemed like he might be able to overcome it all. He looked like the protagonist of some chivalric novel. However, the harsh truth of the world soon set in. Just as Petal admits to Arhan, reality is no chivalric novel. In his final moments, a dying Patel tells a distraught Arhan, "For some reason, I thought you'd come." As Arhan rushes to his side, the knight smiles weakly, saying he's glad to see him. Arhan clenches his jaw in grief. Unable to comprehend, Arhan asks how he can possibly be glad in this situation. As Petal's illness takes its final toll, Arhan screams that he has run out of time and yells, "What in the world is there to be glad about?" Patel calmly recalls their first meeting, admitting his desire to die alone was just a bluff, and confesses it was nothing more than a front to seem strong in the face of death. A shallow bluff. With tears welling in his eyes, Arhan listens as the older man admits he was actually afraid and lonely. "So I'm glad," he says, looking at Arhan. He tells the young man that because he is here by his side, he no longer feels lonely on his final path. At this he pleads, insisting, "You have to live, Sir Petal." He then reminds him of the duel, the challenge that was meant to be the proof of his existence. The young man cries that for it to end like this is just too cruel. As Arhan collapses in grief, Petal rests a comforting hand on his head. Then, he says, "I like the twilight." He poetically describes it as the beautiful light that colors the world between day and night. He then compares it to one's own reflection, a final mark left before death, stating that his own twilight ends here. "But you," he tells Arhan, "are the dawn that has just risen." Petal reveals that he always believed Arhan's story about devouring swords was the truth, not just a lie meant to comfort him. Therefore, he declares, "Please take my sword." Its clunky, worn-out blade, hoping the young man will accept it. With tears streaming down his face, Arhan is asked to accept this heavy burden. His hand closes over Petal's on the hilt of the sword. Through his tears, Arhan accepts his friend's final wish, gladly. With a final, peaceful smile, Petal wishes him good luck in his battle. His last words are a prophecy, that Arhan will surely leave his name in the history of this era. Arhan can only watch in anguish as his friend's life slips away. And so, his kind neighbor, Patel, quietly faded away into his own twilight. The flashback ends, and Arhan stands silently in the present. Mekin callously remarks that such a pathetic end is truly befitting of him. He laments that it's a pity, as he had so much to show him, while his men express their disappointment at not seeing the wings. He, however, quietly reflects that it's fortunate the knight avoided being reduced to a mere spectacle, and declares that regardless of the process, the honor duel is his victory. With a crazed look, he demands, "Hand over the corpse of the loser, Petal." He furiously declares, "It's mine now." But Arhan, his eyes now glowing with a powerful blue light, firmly refuses. "I cannot do that." Wielding Petal's sword and emanating a powerful aura, he declares, "Because the honor duel isn't over yet." He stands firm before the vice-captain, announcing his intentions. Channeling the will of the fallen knight, Arhan prepares to fulfill his friend's legacy. As Sir Patel's champion, Arhan Karavan challenges Mekin to a duel. As Arhan consumes Petal's sword, steel, he is plunged into the memories of the late knight's life. Petal reflected that from the very beginning, he had realized he could never be the protagonist of his own story. The memory begins during a game of cards, where his senior colleagues struggle to recall his name. A young, stoic Petal confirms his name, standing out from his more relaxed peers. One senior knight confronts him, mocking him for being too rigid and unhappy that their nightly gathering had turned into a gambling session. He is called out for his buzzkill face, which he has apparently worn all day. Yet finding his courage, Petal declares that he finds his senior's behavior inappropriate. He then lectures them on knightly dignity, stating that their excessive gambling, drinking, and vulgar jokes go against their ethics. But his senior cuts him off, dismissing his constant talk about being a knight as a waste of breath. He looks at him with disdain, calling him a truly dull guy. Exasperated, the senior tells Patel that he no longer needs to come to gatherings that don't suit him. Effectively ostracized, he is told that he just ruins the mood for everyone else. Humiliated and rejected by his fellow knights, a young Patel can only stand in silence. Not long after he was pushed aside, a new knight joined the gathering. This new knight echoed Patel's sentiment almost word for word, calling the senior's behavior unacceptable. Unlike Patel, however, this newcomer was a confident young man brimming with natural talent. Patel recalled how the newcomer shared many similarities with him, being just as inflexible and deeply engrossed in chivalry. And just as Patel had done, the new knight asked the seniors to exercise some restraint. However, the outcome for the talented newcomer would be drastically different. Instead of being ostracized, his criticism was met with agreement and thanks. The same senior knight who had mocked Patel now enthusiastically praised the junior's firm convictions. He continued to gush, praising the new knight's impressive spirit. The senior proclaimed that this very spirit was why the newcomer, at such a young age, had already become a powerful sword runner. The senior knights then promised to behave better and eagerly invited the talented junior to their next gathering, completely excluding Patel. From the sidelines, Patel could only force a smile, watching as the principles he was shamed for were celebrated in another. Sitting alone, he painfully realized there was only one difference between him and the new knight. That one crucial difference was talent. He remembered his youth, when he had believed in the power of patience and effort. And he thought that if he wasn't recognized, he would simply work harder until he was. So he swung his sword relentlessly, thinking that if he just got stronger, he would one day be able to uphold his convictions through sheer power. Reality, however, was far crueler. With his spirit shattering like a broken sword, Patel finally understood the truth. In a world that prized innate ability, he could never become the protagonist. He was merely a side character in someone else's story. Therefore, to avoid being kicked off the stage of life entirely, he hardened his heart and prepared to make a necessary compromise. He would have to act his part, bowing to the talented newcomer and praising him. He even asked if there's anything he can do to help. He offered to do menial chores, eager to curry favor with the rising star. Patel learned his lesson, bowing low and promising to honorably carry out any order given to him. And thus, through compromise and resignation, the persona of Patel the Loyal was born. Setting his convictions aside, he began to follow his colleagues, carrying their burdens. He forced a smile and played along, his compliance a mask for his inner struggle and self-loathing. After endless cycles of this soul-crushing compromise, he eventually aged out of being a young man. His path finally led him to become a simple guard for a wealthy, noble family. It was there that a cheerful hello signaled a turning point in his life. The young lady of the house, Daisy, excitedly introduced herself, confirming he is to be her new escort knight. She told him that everyone had been saying that he could be trusted completely. She genuinely admired his reputation as a knight who never betrays and is fully devoted to his loyalty. He fondly remembered meeting the young lady who had so enthusiastically welcomed Patel the Loyal. With starry eyes, she had asked him to stay by her side and protect her family forever. Ironically, she compared him to the protagonist of a chivalric novel, the very thing he felt he could never be. Thanks to her uniquely friendly and popular personality, escorting Daisy was an easy and pleasant duty. Even though she was a noble, she was beloved by everyone in the territory. His duties were mundane, mostly involving dealing with the occasional drunk who tried to pick a fight. He acknowledged that this was far from the honorable life he once dreamed of as a knight. He was still a third-rate knight who had compromised with reality, but now, things felt different. Watching her genuine happiness and kindness brought him a strange sense of peace. For some reason, when he was by her side, the past didn't seem to hurt as much. Her radiant smile had a way of cutting through his deep-seated cynicism. With her, his failed dreams and compromises felt like they didn't matter, and he recalled those as the warmest days of his life. But that peace was shattered when war came to the land. Swept up in the succession struggle of the Iron Kingdom, her family's estate was engulfed in flames. Amid the political turmoil, her family fell into ruin. The once grand estate was reduced to ash and rubble. After the disaster, Daisy was no longer the beloved lady of the house, but a ruined noble. Now destitute, she could no longer call for him so casually, instead addressing him formally as Sir Patel. With tears in her eyes, heartbroken, she asks why he is still protecting her ruined family. And she explains that they are now destitute, unable to pay him or even offer him a proper room. In a voice full of despair, she asked, "Why are you still staying by my side?" Faced with her question, Patel reaffirmed the realization he'd had his whole life, that he couldn't be the protagonist. He recalled the bitter compromises he'd made, becoming a sycophant just to survive. and accepted that he was a fated man, not a hero. But even so, in that very moment, he found his one true, unwavering conviction. He remembered the bright, hopeful smile of the young woman who had placed her trust in him. He saw her image, both as she was in her joyful prime and in her current sorrow. The contrast between the celebrated lady and the destitute girl before him solidified his purpose. And so, he finally had his answer for her, because I am Petal the Loyal. His identity was no longer a role he played, but a simple, profound truth: she needed him. Overwhelmed by his unwavering devotion, Daisy broke down in tears. Her grateful thank you was all the purpose he ever needed, and for Petal, it was enough to give his life meaning. Arhan, imbued with Petal's will, stands resolute, declaring that the honor duel isn't over yet. Facing the vice-captain of the Yellow Elephant Knighthood, he formally challenges Mekin to a duel. As he speaks, Arhan recalls Patel, the knight who protected his convictions even in the face of death. He then declares himself the champion of his neighbor, Sir Petal. Mekin is momentarily struck speechless by the boy's audacious challenge. As he studies the boy, he senses a familiar and unsettling presence emanating from him, and notes that the boy's aura is disturbingly similar to that of that bastard Petal's. With his initial excitement for a fight renewed, he smiles and gladly accepts the duel. Ron, adjutant of the Yellow Elephant, steps forward to officiate the honor duel. He explains the simple rules: the duel ends when one side surrenders or is rendered unable to fight. Ron adds a grim warning that no one will be held responsible if a life is lost, a condition Arhan accepts with cold determination. Mekin clarifies his sole condition for the duel: if he wins, he will take Sir Petal's corpse. He cruelly promises to spare Arhan's life, but only after cutting off all his limbs to feed to wild beasts. Arhan calmly and sarcastically thanks him for his mercies. In return, our protagonist declares that he will also spare Mekin's life when he wins. He promises, however, to take both of Mekin's arms as his own act of mercy, leaving the vice-captain to ponder the foolish dreams of a boy. With the terms set, the knights depart, leaving Arhan and Mekin to prepare for their fated duel. The official, Ron, instructs both duelists to step back 10 paces. As they take their positions, he announces the duel will begin as soon as they are ready. Arhan recalls that after devouring Petal's sword, there was only one thing he could do: to understand the blade. He had simply swung it until his arms felt like they would tear off. He knew that this grueling, repetitive training was the only way to truly understand Sir Petal's sword. He reflects that Patel's sword was fundamentally different from Mary's needle or the assassin's fang. It was utterly faithful to the basics, without tricks or deceit, appearing boring and inflexible to some. It was a sword so upright it wouldn't bend against the wind, a blade that would ultimately choose to break rather than yield. However, it was precisely because of this unbending nature that it was an unyielding sword, more so than anything he had ever seen. Liam's spirit explains that those who reach a realm above a sword runner all possess their own set of values. The spirit continues, noting that pursuing those values is what directly leads to a rise in their realm of power. One with upright values, like Patel, advances by relentlessly honing their sword and convictions. In contrast, one with destructive values, like Mekin, gains strength by trampling on the convictions of others. Liam explains that this is precisely why Mekin is so obsessed with Patel. The vice-captain had intended to desecrate the corpse of the noble and unyielding knight, using it as a twisted sacrifice to fuel his own selfish ambition and gain power. The spirit praises him, saying, "You certainly couldn't just stand by and watch that atrocity take place." The only way forward, the spirit instructs, is for Arhan to fully accept the entirety of Petal's will and become an even sturdier, more unyielding steel himself. Back in the present, Mekin mockingly compliments Arhan's stance, asking if the dying knight had given him some pointers. However, he realizes there must be a reason the boy so confidently bared his fangs. Arrogantly, he grants Arhan the first move, daring him to come at him. He condescendingly promises to teach him the overwhelming gap in class that a frog in a well could never hope to cross. As Arhan charges forward, Mekin prepares to demonstrate the vast difference in their power. But he is shocked by what he feels from his opponent's blade before their swords clash. With stunned disbelief, he recognizes the overwhelming force as a fully formed path. Arhan brings the full weight of Patel's indomitable will down upon the vice-captain as their swords clash. Mekin struggles, unable to comprehend how he is being pressured when the difference in their realms should be undeniable. He questions how the path of a mere swordwalker could possibly be this heavy, forcing a grunt of effort from the superior knight. The sheer force of Arhan's strike sends Mekin sliding backward across the ground. The boy relentlessly presses his advantage, his blade sparking against Mekin's in a furious assault. The onlookers, including Mekin's own men, watch in stunned disbelief at the impossible sight. Mekin is forced to dig his sword into the ground, desperately trying to halt his opponent's overpowering momentum. Blood trickles from his lips as he struggles against the unexpected and overwhelming force. He spits blood, enraged at the disgrace of being physically dominated. His pride is shattered, as he cannot believe that a mere brat's managed to push him back. His arrogant worldview crumbles as he finds a situation impossible to accept. He, Mekin, the one chosen by the heavens, cannot fathom being pushed back by a mere swordwalker. Arhan stands over his reeling opponent, declaring that now that their swords have finally clashed, he knows the truth. "Your sword is soft," he states with cold finality, condemning Mekin's strength as hollow. Arhan declares that comparing his opponent's selfish blade to Sir Patel's unwavering resolve is an absolute insult. The duel against Mekin triggers a flashback, revealing a time when a younger, fiercer Mekin served in the same knighthood as Patel. In the memory, their captain lectures a young Mekin, warning him not to be arrogant about his early talent and comparing him to a tall tower built without a sturdy foundation. The captain continues, assuring the young knight that one day he will come to resent his own negligence of the fundamentals. And with grim certainty, the captain promises that his future regret will be felt quite bitterly. Back in the present, a disdainful Mekin scoffs at his former captain's words, declaring that the only thing determining a sword's strength is the wielder's realm. To prove his point, he unleashes the explosive power of his realm as his golden aura erupts with force. His raw power effortlessly blasts Arhan backward, demonstrating the massive gap in their abilities. Meanwhile, watching from the spirit realm, Liam calmly notes that while Arhan's time with Patel's sword has been short, it has already borne some fruit. He explains that the previous swords Arhan digested, the Needle and Fang, were unusual choices for someone with no natural martial talent. However, he clarifies that Patel's sword is fundamentally different from those specialized weapons. He then describes it as commonplace yet incredibly sturdy, a perfect reflection of its unyielding master, and concludes that the memory of this steadfast man is exactly the inspiration our protagonist needs to overcome this trial. As the duel rages on, Liam advises his descendant that this is only the beginning of a tough fight. He points out that Arhan's initial successful strike was merely a fluke, capitalizing on his opponent's carelessness. But now that he has spread his wings, his opponent's luck has officially run out. Arhan feels the immense pressure of his opponent's fighting spirit, a sharp aura that feels as though it's carving up his entire body. Despite the overwhelming power, our hero steels his resolve, reminding himself that while Mekin has wings, he has the power of Karavan and the memories of his swords. Relying on his training, he grips his sword and prepares his strategy, maintain distance and suspect everything. He focuses, planning to match his opponent's breathing to control the flow of battle, just as he's always done. But his strategy is instantly shattered as Mekin vanishes from sight. Unleashing the full speed of his wings, the knight soars through the air, moving faster than Arhan can perceive. Arhan is left completely stunned, unable to process his opponent's impossible speed. In a moment of shock, he wonders how Mekin could have possibly appeared behind him so quickly. The brutal answer comes in a spray of blood as the attack lands before he can even react. Arhan cries out in pure agony from the devastating lightning-fast strike. He collapses to his knees, grievously wounded, while Mekin looks down on him in triumph. The knight mockingly praises Arhan's intuition for raising his sword, noting it's the only reason he wasn't cut in two. With a cruel smirk, he adds that this pathetic instinct to survive will only increase his suffering. Mekin's terrifying aura envelops Arhan, promising a world of pain for his defiance. As Arhan struggles against the pain, Liam's spirit appears once more to give him a crucial lesson. He explains the power of a swordrunner's wings, an ability that allows them to sprint as if gliding through anything. This power accelerates both body and mind, granting its user movements that transcend normal perception. He continues, stating that a swordrunner with their wings spread is like the wind, leaving only ghost-like afterimages behind. This incredible speed is precisely why they are known as the ghosts of the battlefield. The true form of a swordrunner is revealed, a being of pure power, wreathed in golden wings of energy. Liam's spirit then harshly reprimands his descendant, questioning if he has become complacent after his last victory. He yells at the foolish boy to get a grip and focus on the fight. Liam bluntly informs him that he's only alive because Mekin is a half-wit with just a single pair of wings. His ancestor lays out the stark reality. The only way for Arhan to win is to somehow break Mekin's wings. Arhan falls into despair, realizing his opponent is incomparably faster than even the superhuman Patel or Solyun. Overwhelmed and trembling, he desperately searches for a method, any method, to fight back. Meanwhile, Mekin smugly acknowledges Arhan's sturdiness, admitting it's understandable why he dared to volunteer for this duel. However, he dismisses this tenacity as meaningless before the absolute power of a higher realm. Calling him a foolish boy, he demands that he throw down his sword, bow his head, and apologize for his stupidity. After that, he delivers a humiliating ultimatum: surrender Patel's corpse, and in return, he will show mercy by letting Arhan live. Mekin looks down on the seemingly defeated Arhan, coldly stating that he has done all he possibly could. Even Mekin's subordinate, Ron, advises Arhan to stop hesitating, reminding him that he had no chance of winning from the start. He urges him to accept the vice captain's offer and save his own life, calling it the only wise course of action. As Arhan kneels, bloodied and broken, he can only question why this is happening. But as he reaches for his sword, a powerful memory of Patel surfaces, a desperate plea for the knight not to go. In the flashback, a worried Daisy tells Petal that his opponent has an entire escort of skilled swordsmen. She reminds him that he's one of the few precious people she has left. Clutching his cloak, a tearful Daisy begs him not to fight, as she can't bear to lose him too. Petal's memory then crystallizes around a single painful truth. His lady had been hurt, and he recalls the moment a lecherous noble publicly humiliated her simply because her family had fallen from grace. Patel remembers knowing full well that challenging the noble was an act of needless bravado that would likely get him killed. But despite the impossible odds, he had taken her hand and promised her not to worry. With unwavering resolve, he calmly promised his lady that he would be right back. In that moment, faced with a hopeless fight, his purpose became singular and clear. He chose to defend something more important than his own life, and more precious than his honor. Drawing his sword, Patel formally identified himself as the loyal knight of Lady Daisy Crossell. He then challenged the arrogant noble to an honor duel, ready to fight for what was most precious to him. Back in the present, Arhan's sudden change in posture and aura shocks the onlooking knights. Getting to his feet, our protagonist looks up at Mekin and coldly states, "I do not need mercy from the likes of you." Channeling Petal's indomitable will, Arhan defiantly challenges his opponent to bring it on, now truly ready for his first real honor duel. Watching from the sidelines, Mekin's subordinate Ron looks on with growing apprehension. Infuriated by this defiance, the vice captain gathers his power, his sword-runner aura flaring with rage. With a malevolent gleam in his eye, he snarls, promising to make Arhan beg for death. Arhan realizes Mekin has abandoned his flashy wings for raw superhumanization, a clear declaration that he intends to trample our protagonist's conviction without pity. Switching tactics, Mekin lunges forward, intending to overwhelm Arhan with maximum unrestrained violence. Arhan barely manages to parry the explosive attack, his blade straining under the immense pressure. The force of the strike is overwhelming, sending him skidding backward across the shattered ground. The vice captain relentlessly presses his advantage, forcing Arhan into a desperate, defensive struggle against his superior strength. Yet, despite being overpowered, his gaze remains locked on his opponent with cold, unyielding determination. Mekin unleashes a devastating blow that craters the earth, confident that he has crushed his opponent. Smirking at the destruction, he callously comments that it would be a problem if Arhan couldn't even withstand that level of attack. But to his surprise, Arhan is still standing, prompting the vice captain to declare that his execution has only just begun. He sneers at the battered young knight, vowing to slowly crush both his body and his convictions. Mekin's goal is now clear: to make Arhan experience the soul-crushing reality of overwhelming despair. As he prepares another devastating blow, he shouts for Arhan to get ready for what's coming. But Arhan sidesteps and dodges it, and coolly states, "That's exactly what I was hoping for." The two swordsmen are locked in a furious struggle for dominance, their blades clashing with blinding speed. However, unable to match Mekin's raw power, Arhan is once again sent skidding back by a powerful strike. The relentless assault takes its toll, as his body is now seriously injured. Despite his grave injuries, his eyes burn with a defiant, unwavering resolve that refuses to be extinguished. Mekin roars in frustration, enraged by the damned look of defiance in Arhan's eyes. Losing his composure, he grabs Arhan's head and strikes his face with his knee, trying to physically crush his spirit. Spitting blood, Arhan collapses, his sword falling from his grasp. Mekin stands over him, mocking his audacity for looking down on a superior swordrunner. He then mercilessly kicks the fallen knight, calling him a dime a dozen, Walker who is nothing more than fodder. Completely enraged, Mekin screams, questioning how Arhan dares to look down on him, the chosen one. Ron can only watch in dismay as his captain rants that Arhan's knightly convictions are nothing but irritating relics of the past. Observing the scene, Liam's spirit notes that Mekin is projecting his own insecurities, angered that Arhan's unwavering attitude denies his perceived talent. And, at his lowest point, the silhouette of Patel, the very man whose honor he fights for, appears in Arhan's consciousness. Suddenly, a powerful light emanates from Arhan's eyes as he taps into a deeper source of strength. Meekin screams in fury, declaring that the young knight's unwavering defiance reminds him of that damn old man, Arhan Karavan. In that moment, Arhan's consciousness is flooded with a critical memory from Patel's sword, steel. The flashback reveals Patel's thoughts before a past duel he had no intention of winning. He recalls the hopeless honor duel he fought against an arrogant noble to defend Lady Daisy's name. Even as their blades were locked, Patel knew it was not a fight he was meant to win. His goal was far greater. It was a fight to never lose, a battle to uphold his conviction, even in death. The entire duel was for Daisy's sake, a final act of loyalty to protect her honor. Filled with this profound understanding of Patel's will, Arhan slowly pushes himself back to his feet. He meets Mekin's next attack, his parry now strong enough to halt the vice-captain's blade, making him grunt in surprise. Enraged by this sudden resistance, Mekin screamed at the insignificant worm to know his place. With a powerful counter, Arhan's blade clashes with Mekin's, eliciting a furious, "How dare you?" from the vice-captain. Watching this incredible turnaround, Liam's spirit smirks, noting that it's not a mere fluke. He explains to himself that in a duel between a swordrunner and a walker, there is simply no room for chance, and reflects that what his young descendant truly needed was not an easy victory, but a desperate, life-or-death trial to forge his own true strength. As Arhan attacks Mekin's face, Liam concludes that the arrogant vice-captain was simply too careless. A trickle of blood runs down Mekin's cheek as he struggles to comprehend the overwhelming power now pushing against him. His eye widens in pure, unadulterated shock at the impossible situation unfolding before him. Screaming at the lowly bastard, he gathers every last bit of his power for one final desperate attack. Arhan, however, dodges the attack by leaping into the air. Mekin leaps into the air, declaring, "Playtime's over," before attacking, and screams, "I'm going to kill you right now." But now, channeling Patel's absolute conviction, Arhan vows that while carrying Daisy's honor, he will never lose, even in death. He brings his sword down, his body glowing with the indomitable blue light of Patel's will, now fully manifested in the sword's steel. With a final, guttural roar, he unleashes the full, awakened power of that conviction. Mekin can only stare in disbelief and ask, "What is this?" But as the attack connects, it hurls Mekin downward, crashing into the ground and shattering it like an explosion. In a flashback, Patel recalls winning his first honor duel. Even then, he sensed that his lady, Daisy, would face endless scorn from aristocratic society. For her, a fallen noble, this victory was not the end of her suffering but only the beginning. He knew that despite his victory, nothing would truly change for her. And so he gripped his sword, ready to defend her honor no matter the cost. In a show of defiance, a sneering noble throws wine on Daisy's dress. Patel watched as the arrogant man dared to sully her honor and bring her shame. His eyes flashing with cold fury, he immediately challenges the man to an honor duel. After swiftly defeating the noble, Patel stands over his fallen opponent. As the price for victory, he makes a simple demand of the defeated man. Looking down at the insolent noble who had shamed his lady, Patel coldly commands him to kneel and beg for forgiveness, affirming his duty to protect her with his life. Arhan, witnessing these memories, laments that Patel was not more cunning or selfish for his own sake. In the memory, a destitute Daisy asks him to leave her, believing her family's contract is long over. She insists that he is now a respected knight who can go anywhere he wishes. Crying, she begs him not to die at her side, but to live a life of his own. But Patel gently tells her that, unfortunately, he could never become that kind of person. He smiles faintly, admitting he couldn't grant her request to leave. Soon after, the world pushed Daisy into even deeper tragedy with the outbreak of the Iron Kingdom's War of Succession. Her father and brothers were caught in the conflict and slaughtered, while her mother, taken prisoner, ultimately took her own life in despair. Daisy thus became the sole survivor and head of her family in name only, clad in ill-fitting armor. She was then conscripted and forced onto the battlefield. Overwhelmed by the horror, a young Daisy cries, convinced she is going to die. Panicked, she desperately tells Patel to escape, insisting he has no duty to die with her. But Patel shakes her, yelling for her to get a hold of herself. He vehemently commands her to never leave his side. With a roar of determination, he vows that he, Patel the Loyal, will protect her without fail. The memory shifts to a battlefield where flaming arrows rain down from the sky. It was a horrific place where bombardments from mages rained down without end. But for Patel, none of it mattered. His sole purpose was to protect her, a role that would not change. He fought relentlessly, cutting down every enemy soldier who charged at them. Blocking every blow, he cut down all who approached. He fought endlessly, cutting them down again and again. The relentless battle raged on, with the two of them fighting side by side. By the time it was over, even the once gentle Daisy had become a hardened warrior. Then a rainbow appears in the sky, signaling the end of the long war. Amidst the fallen, she helps a battered petal stand tall as they carry their banner. Against all odds, the two of them survived. After the war, Daisy's achievements were recognized, and she was granted a countess's title and her own territory. Now a ruler, somber and determined, she looks out upon her new responsibilities. However, only one last grim trial remained for her war-torn land. The land was struck by a devastating famine, causing the people to riot in desperation. She had to endure the fury of her people, who had lost their families and homes in the endless war. Petal, however, was simply grateful that the riot broke out while she was away. He was grateful to take all of their anger upon himself. Enduring their stones was nothing to him. In the memory, a battered he stands guard alone, absorbing the people's wrath to protect his lady. His eye is wounded, but he doesn't waver, determined to see this through. A vision of men trying to drag a younger Daisy away flashes through his mind. He remembers her running in terror, a memory he is determined will never be repeated. He catches her as she runs to him, a beaten knight standing before his lady. With his last words in the memory, he comforts her, saying, "Please do not cry. I am so very glad to have been your knight." With the complete digestion of Patel's final, selfless will, a surge of blue energy flows into Arhan. His attack hurls Meccan downward, and the ground shatters in an explosion. Meccan is thrown to his knees, gasping in pain from the overwhelming pressure. He feels a sudden dizziness, wondering what is happening. Then he violently coughs up blood, realizing he's suffering from mana shock. He stares at his trembling hand in disbelief, knowing this phenomenon only occurs when clashing with an overwhelmingly powerful opponent. And he knows that mana shock is impossible without mana mastery honed to the absolute limit. Screaming in denial, he finds it impossible to believe that a mere greenhorn could reach such a realm. Arhan stands calmly, enveloped in the blue aura of Patel's fully realized power. Desperate for an explanation, Meccan wildly accuses him of making a deal with a witch of the Sky Empire and using a wicked magic tool. He calls Arhan a coward for using what he believes to be sorcery in an honor duel between knights, and shouts that the wings of a sword runner were always too good for the likes of him. Gritting his teeth in fury, he declares he will now lower himself to his opponent's level for the final clash. Meanwhile, Arhan reflects on his own stubbornness and inferiority complex, the feelings that drove him along the Swordwalker path. He believes no other swordsman has clung so miserably to the end of that path as he has. Because of this unique and arduous journey, he is certain of one thing. Brimming with hard-won confidence, he declares that in a fight against another walker, he will never be defeated. The duel between Arhan and Meccan reaches a fever pitch, their swords clashing with explosive force. The honor duel continues in a blur of motion, locking both warriors in a desperate struggle for dominance. Arhan skillfully deflects a powerful, mana-infused swing from the vice-captain. Just then, Argai unleashes his full power, forcing Meccan onto the defensive with a powerful strike from his sword. He relentlessly attacks, making him scream in frustration as he is overwhelmed. Watching from the sidelines, Ron can hardly believe Arhan's talent, noting that for someone so young to even be a swordwalker is the mark of a prodigy. He marvels at how every one of Arhan's sword trajectories remains pure and solid, even after taking a wound that should make it difficult to even stand, and concludes that he has never seen such a unique and powerful swordsman from the Yellow Elephant Knighthood, or any knighthood for that matter. Completely baffled, but he wonders, there is no way Meccan doesn't know that this is when he should go all out to seize the victory. He furiously demands to know why Meccan won't use that power to match him. When Arhan strikes, Meccan remains silent, his expression unreadable. Then, a slow, cruel smile spreads across Meccan's face as he comes to a sudden and terrible realization, and declares that it's not that his opponent won't use superhumanization to match his speed and power, but that he can't, a realization that fills the arrogant vice-captain with triumphant glee. With his opponent's critical weakness seemingly exposed, he decides the time for games is over. Believing Arhan is now an easy target, he launches what he is sure will be the final strike. He sneers that with nothing left to hold him back, he can finally finish this and claim his victory. He then brings his full weight and power down in a decisive, crushing blow, forcing Argai onto the defensive. Pushed to his absolute limit, Arhan's mind flashes back to Petal's memory of their first fateful meeting. In the memory, Patel fondly recalls meeting a boy with an unbelievably steadfast heart, even in the face of despair. Back in the present, Meccan mocks Arhan's futile resistance, declaring his desperate struggle to be useless. Petal's memory continues, remembering a boy who did not yield even when faced with an unfathomable, insurmountable wall. Meccan roars at him to simply give up and die, seeing his continued resistance as an insult. He attacks again and again, determined to break the boy's spirit and end the duel. Petal's memory affirms his belief in Arhan, while Mekin screams, "Die just like that abandoned, washed-up bastard," and swings his sword with all his might. Confident in his choice, Patel's memory concludes that Arhan is the one who will carry on his sword. A massive explosion rocks the battlefield as Mekin's most powerful attack finally connects. Both Liam Caravan and the knight Ron look on in absolute shock, with Ron wondering if his eyes are deceiving him. And yet, somehow, Arhan has endured the devastating blow, much to Mekin's utter disbelief. Panting in exhaustion and fury, he can only ask, why? And furiously questions why Arhan is still holding out, reminding him of the immense painful gap in their skill and power. He screams at him, asking what could possibly be gained from a duel he has no chance of winning. Battered and bleeding, Arhan has an epiphany, realizing this fight isn't to gain something for himself. He understands now that he's fighting to uphold the path of the sword and honor that Sir Petal walked. In a profound moment of clarity, he accepts that his purpose is to carry on the noble path inherited from his fallen friend. With that, a brilliant explosion of pure blue mana erupts from deep within his body. With newfound resolve, he declares that this is a fight he must not lose, even if he dies trying, as he finally activates his own superhumanization. He unleashes a terrifyingly powerful counterattack that completely catches the arrogant Mekin off guard. The vice-captain struggles to parry the blow, gritting his teeth against a level of power he never thought the boy possessed. To his absolute horror, Mekin's own sword begins to crack and splinter under the immense strain of the attack. Panicked, he frantically wonders what new sorcery his opponent is using to achieve this impossible feat. As Arhan presses his attack, the spectral image of Patel appears behind him, haunting the terrified vice-captain. He screams in disbelief, questioning why the ghost of that washed-up bastard is appearing before him now. The devastating attack finally shatters Mekin's blade, leaving him completely defenseless. With nothing left to stop it, Arhan's sword slices cleanly through Mekin's guard. In a brutal and decisive display of power, both of the vice-captain's arms are severed at the elbow. The dismembered man screams in pure agony as he collapses to the ground in defeat. Breathing heavily but standing victorious, Arhan asks his defeated opponent, "Did you see it?" With glowing eyes filled with the power of his conviction, he declares that this overwhelming strength is Sir Petal's sword. In the aftermath of their duel, a defeated and dismembered Mekin groans in agony on the blood-soaked ground. Standing over his fallen foe, Arhan listens as Mekin defiantly insists that his command is in order. Consumed by rage and humiliation, he screams at his remaining knights to kill Arhan. But as his men hesitate, he furiously repeats the order, demanding they beat Arhan to death right now. Before the knights can act, Ron takes matters into his own hands, knocking him unconscious with a single strike of his sword, and coldly informs his unconscious vice-captain that any further shameful behavior would disgrace the honor of the entire Yellow Elephant knighthood. Turning to the victor, he formally acknowledges Arhan's victory and declares that his defeated vice-captain must accept it with honor. He then respectfully asks Arhan for permission to move Mekin to the infirmary, which is curtly granted. Thanking Arhan for his consideration, the knights swiftly carry their fallen vice-captain away from the battlefield. With the scene cleared, Ron begins to explain the formal procedures that follow an honor duel, and details that the victor is entitled to demand one of three things from the loser. He then lists the first two prizes, confiscating the loser's wealth or destroying their honor by enslaving them. Just as he begins to explain the third option, a flag, Arhan cuts him off, stating that he is already aware. To Ron's utter shock, he declares that he wants the ancient and rarely chosen flag as his prize. Seeing the conviction in Arhan's eyes, Ron understands his intent and accepts the unusual request. However, he clarifies that granting the flag is beyond his authority and that he must relay the wish to the knighthood's main force. Setting aside his official duties, he then places a hand over his heart to offer a personal and sincere gesture. He formally salutes him, paying his deepest respects for protecting the honor of Sir Petal the Loyal. Arhan stands resolute, his duty fulfilled and Patel's honor avenged. Later, on a quiet cliffside, he solemnly lifts Petal's sword, its blade still coated in the blood of the man who disrespected its master, and informs Liam's spirit that he wishes to bestow a name upon Petal's sword. Arhan recalls Petal's humility, remembering how the knight felt his own sword was too insignificant to be named. But he counters this belief, asserting that the sword contains the legacy of Patel's weary yet noble life. Liam's spirit smiles in approval, calling it a fine idea to immortalize the sword with a name befitting its history, and asks Arhan what name he has chosen for the blade. Our guy closes his eyes, reflecting on the weight of Patel's life and the sword that represents it. Memories of his time with Patel, from their first encounter to his final passing, flash through his mind. Inspired by the setting sun and the end of a journey, he christens the sword Twilight. Several days after the duel, the consequences begin to unfold under the full moon. A groan of pain is heard from within the Yellow Elephant Knighthood's camp. Inside a tent, the now armless Vice Captain Meekin thrashes in his bed, screaming in agony and fury. As his knights try to calm him, Mekin furiously dismisses them as useless fools and tells them to shut up. He rages that Arhan abandoned the honor of a knight and insists that the duel was his victory, and furiously orders his men to bring him Petal's corpse and Arhan, vowing to claim the prize of his victory himself. In his delirium, he screams his vile intentions to dismember Arhan and tear Patel's corpse to shreds. His rant is cut short as he swears revenge in the name of the Yellow Elephant, his voice choked with impotent rage. Suddenly, a commanding voice cuts through the tent, declaring the pathetic tantrum a disgrace. Captain Bermartin of the Yellow Elephant Knighthood enters, sternly reminding Meekin that unripened wings are as fragile as paper. He berates his vice-captain, telling him that his weak foundation meant he was always going to be ripped apart by a sturdier foe, and he has arrived to pass judgment. With biting sarcasm, he congratulates him on proving this truth at the cost of both his arms. When the trembling Meekin asks why he is there, the captain coldly reminds him that Arhan spared his life in exchange for those very arms. With absolute authority, he declares that Arhan's demand will be met. He shall be given the flag. The captain's decision leaves the already broken Meekin completely stunned. He questions the decision to grant such a useless and outdated prize, but Bermartin asserts the reason is obvious, and explains that Arhan won precisely because he possesses a conviction as solid as steel, which Mekin clearly lacks. The flag is a forgotten demand, made solely for honor, not for wealth or submission. This ancient right dictates that if the victor demands the flag, a specific protocol must be followed. The tradition states that not only the loser, but their entire organization must show the highest respect for the victor's honor. This respect must be demonstrated by whatever means necessary, binding the entire knighthood to Arhan's honor. The captain clarifies that while the flag is a tradition from an old age that leaves nothing but honor, it is still a powerful statement, and concludes that for this very reason, demanding the flag is the most profoundly knightly choice one can make. Bermartin then lets out a hearty laugh, astonished that, in this profit-driven age, a true swordsman of conviction and chivalry actually exists. He then reveals to Mekin that gathering a force of this size in just a few days would have been difficult even for him, and explains his swift arrival was only possible thanks to a special guest who came specifically to see Mekin. He adds an ominous warning, noting that Patel, the knight Mekin so foolishly insulted, was clearly no ordinary man. Outside the tent, the knighthood and a host of robed figures form a path of honor for an approaching guest. As Daisy arrives, Bermartin commands the disgraced Mekin to show proper respect to their esteemed visitor. The captain explains that their guest is from one of the 5 great houses that steer the continent's political order. She is from the White family, the master of the Watchers who protect the Iron Kingdom. With a heavy finality, he announces to the terrified Mekin, "Its mistress has come to see you." Daisy White lowers her fan, revealing eyes that burn with cold fury as she glares at the man who wronged her knight. Mekin recoils in terror, unable to fathom how the sickly Petal could have ties to the powerful mistress of the House of White. With a chilling threat, Daisy confirms his identity, saying, "So it was you." She addresses the armless knight directly, calling him the vile rat who disturbed Petal's rest by challenging him to an honor duel. Her eyes flash with rage as she condemns him for attempting to defile the honor of her loyal knight. In her own name, she coldly promises him that he will regret not dying in the duel, and that he will spend his remaining life in despair. As the mistress of the White family, she makes a solemn vow she will make certain that Meekin pays the price for his transgression. In the days following the brutal honor duel, Arhan begins his recovery at the Caravan mansion. He recalls how Soyun's attentive care helped him recover quickly from his severe injuries. However, he also remembers with dread her attempt to feed him a mysterious purple stew. The taste was so horrifying that it nearly made him choke. He was left speechless when she proudly asked if her cooking was good, and can only describe the bubbling purple concoction as something that couldn't even be called food. Once he had recovered, it was time to say a final farewell to their fallen comrade. Arhan and Seolyun hold a funeral for Sir Petal, honoring his memory with a traditional pyre. They perform the Rest in Fire rite, a tradition of the Martia order that the knight once served. This ceremony is believed to send the soul to be embraced by Martia, the goddess of the sky, through the rising smoke. Watching the embers ascend, Arhan bids Patel a peaceful journey to the goddess's embrace. Seolyun also pays her respects, silently watching the flames consume the pyre. After the ceremony, Arhan stands alone at Petal's grave. Suddenly, a voice interrupted, calling out to him, "So it's you." The visitor, Lady Daisy, addresses him as her Petal's champion, acknowledging how he protected the knight's honor. Arhan is momentarily stunned, stammering as he confirms the identity of the noblewoman before him. It is indeed Lady Daisy, the very person Petal dedicated his life to protecting. Just then, a flare shoots into the night sky, signaling the start of a grand spectacle. The sky explodes with a brilliant display of fireworks, a tribute to the fallen knight. Arhan watches in awe, muttering, "My goodness," at the extravagant display. Then, a group of robed priests appears, beginning a magnificent ritual to honor Patel. Their magic transforms the smoke into a fiery phoenix, a sight Arhan has never witnessed before. As he marvels at the spectacle, Daisy declares that this ceremony is nothing compared to the honor Patel truly built. With resolute determination, she vows to use her power to elevate his honor even further. She plans for bards to sing of Petal the Loyal throughout the kingdom. Furthermore, she will ensure his name is forever spoken alongside discussions of chivalry at her family's academy. Watching the fireworks, Daisy wistfully remembers her beloved knight. She proudly proclaims to Arhan that her Petal was a knight worthy of such a grand remembrance. A flashback then reveals Petal's true reason for leaving. He felt his very presence had become a poison in her life. After the war, Daisy's territory stabilized, and she became an accomplished and respected lady of the land. With powerful swordrunner knights assigned to her protection, she was safe from all threats. He recalls that he no longer needed to risk his life for her, and found himself without any cause to fight another honor duel. However, this peace came at a cost, as if paying the price for a life lived on the edge. The flashback shows the moment his incurable illness first manifested with a bloody cough. He had been struck down by a disease that defied all attempts at a cure. Daisy immediately used every resource at her disposal to try and heal him. Yet despite her frantic efforts, his condition showed no improvement. The healers delivered a grim diagnosis, recommending strict isolation due to the risk of contagion. But she refused to abandon him, staying by his side and pouring all her resources into finding a cure. She willingly sacrificed everything she had in a desperate attempt to save her loyal knight. But as she tirelessly cared for him, their closeness began to attract unwanted attention. Vicious rumors started to circulate among the nobles about the nature of their relationship. Jealous and scornful lords whispered that the lady of the land was being bewitched by a mere knight. Petal overheard these vile rumors. Understanding the damage they were causing to her reputation, he agonized over the realization that his presence was becoming a poison, eroding the life and honor of the woman he served. And so, to protect her, he made the painful decision to leave. But on the night of his departure, Daisy found him and grabbed him from behind, and he asked why she is out so late without an escort. With desperation in her voice, she begged him not to leave, promising to find a cure, even if it meant searching the entire continent. She vowed to protect him to the very end, even from death itself. Clutching his cloak, she pleaded with him to just stay by her side. Finally, with tears streaming down her face, she confessed her true feelings. "I love you, Petal." It was a confession of a forbidden love, a feeling between a lady and her knight. A mere knight, Petal knew, should not dare to hold such feelings for his lady. Yet, he admits, those were the words he had longed to hear his entire life. Despite his own feelings, he gritted his teeth and held back his response. He couldn't bear the thought of dragging his newly prosperous lady into the darkness of his illness and the ensuing scandal. And so, in a moment of ultimate sacrifice, Patel swallowed the words he longed to say. The memory shows him walking away from a heartbroken Daisy, unable to say what was truly in his heart. The words he couldn't speak aloud echo in his memory. "I loved you too, Daisy." Back in the present, Daisy continues to watch the fireworks, a grand but lonely tribute. She stands silently, lost in the memories of her tragic love. She then tells Arhan that Petal was the one who brought light into her otherwise gray and miserable life. He was the constant who stayed by her side through every cruel trial she faced. He was her teacher, a man whose back she could always trust as she moved forward. To her, he was nothing short of a savior. She confesses that he was the only love she ever wanted to be with forever. Tears stream down her face as she laments that he didn't deserve to die so alone and unfulfilled. Having finally witnessed the depth of their tragic love story, Arhan understands what he must do. He makes a solemn vow to Petal's spirit, promising to preserve the knight's unspoken feelings. And he hopes that one day, beyond the twilight of this life, Petal might meet his lady once more. He declares that when that time comes, Patel will have to tell his lady his true feelings himself. By understanding Patel's deepest sacrifice and vowing to honor his unspoken love, Arhan finally and completely digests the sword, Twilight.
Hey everyone! If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out and lets me bring you more great content.